The story opens with a young girl joyfully swinging back and forth. As she plays, she turns to her father and mentions that her teacher asked why he didn't attend the recent meeting. In a bid to defend herself, she explains that her father was once a god of war, but due to his injuries, he is now paralyzed. This revelation only adds to her struggles as she faces constant bullying at school. Her mother endures harsh remarks, and the daughter, feeling helpless, often catches her crying in the quiet of the night. All she longs for is Lin Feng to awaken soon. Even in his unconscious state, he senses his daughter's tears and the hope shining in her eyes. Suddenly, a boy her age appears, mocking her with a taunt about her tears. Rui tries to brush it off, but he escalates, spitting out a vile rumor that her mother exploits a disabled man. Fury ignites within Rui. Without a second thought, she leaps off the swing and charges at Zhou Xiaohu. In a fierce outburst, she warns the bully that if he dares insult her parents again, he will deeply regret it. Xiaohu, towering over her, shoved Rui forcefully to the ground. She struck her head against the swing behind her, and he laughed at her pain, even spitting on her. Lying there, Rui clenched the grass in her hands, trembling with rage as he mocked her, calling her a little animal. Unable to endure the insults any longer, she lunged at him and sank her teeth into his hand. The bully's parents were close by, and when his mother spotted her son being attacked, she rushed over in a fury. Without hesitation, she kicked Rui and screamed that she was nothing but a wild, uneducated brat. Now back on the ground, Rui glared at the woman, who was behaving even worse than her son. The woman seized Rui, disregarding her protests, and dragged her toward Xiaohu. With a forceful shove, she threw Rui down and began shouting at her to kneel and apologize. Meanwhile, the protagonist sat in his wheelchair, his internal energy simmering with rage at the injustice faced by his daughter. Anger and the instinct to protect her surged within him as he observed the scene unfold. Rui couldn't fathom why she should apologize to the boy who had insulted her father. Just then, Xiaohu's father intervened, yanking the girl by her ponytail and compelling her to apologize. Rui stood her ground, defiance etched on her face, even as the woman struck her hard. With a gaze filled with pure contempt, Xiaohu's mother demanded to know if Rui was truly unwilling to apologize. Despite being outnumbered by 2 adults, Rui remained resolute, refusing to back down. Just then, Xiaohu's father raised his hand, ready to teach her a lesson. But to everyone's astonishment, the protagonist intervened, halting his hand mid-air. Lin seized the man, his voice low and menacing as he demanded to know how he dared to lay a hand on his daughter. That day marked a turning point for our hero. He had finally regained his powers. With a fierce declaration, he vowed that anyone who dared to harm his daughter would face the ultimate consequence, beheading. Initially, Xiaohu's father had felt a sense of superiority, but now the reality of his precarious situation was unmistakable. From that moment forward, Lin was resolute in his determination to protect his family from any humiliation. He pinned a man to the ground as Xiaohu and his mother stood frozen, paralyzed by fear. The woman, terrified for her husband, frantically searched for a way to help him. In a desperate attempt, she charged at Lin, striking him while pleading for him to release her husband. She even threatened to call the police, but Lin cut her off before she could finish. His slap sent her hurtling backward with brutal force. As she landed on the grass, Lin coldly reminded her that she had dared to strike his daughter. Rage surged within him as he declared that they should never forget this day, for he was sparing their lives. Despite their attack on his daughter, Lin's thoughts wandered back to memories of his battles, fighting alone against countless soldiers. The last warrior standing gasped for breath, his body battered and marked with abrasions. Suddenly, a voice rang out praising him, claiming he could single-handedly inspire an army of 10,000. Lin turned sharply toward the sound, just as more warriors descended before him, declaring that they wouldn't let him win so easily. One soldier stepped forward, acknowledging that Lin was indeed worthy of his title. However, he insisted that today would mark Lin's downfall at the hands of the 7 sons of the Western Alliance. Upon hearing their audacious declaration, Lin smirked, raising his spear with unwavering determination. He roared back, declaring that after 6 long years of battle, he had no reason to fear them now. The leader of the Western Alliance charged in, intent on delivering a lethal blow. Warriors closed in around Lin, their weapons gleaming as they lunged, determined to leave him no chance of escape. But Lin moved like a shadow, slipping past the blades with uncanny agility. Though the handle of a spear grazed his body, he remained unfazed. In a swift counter, Lin unleashed the full force of his spear, sending one of the Alliance members flying aside. Behind him, the leader advanced, weapon raised, certain this would be the final blow, but Lin moved with lightning speed. His spear thrust through the enemy's body, crimson spilling from the man's mouth as disbelief washed over his features. Lin coldly declared that he was too weak, asserting that even an army of 10,000 could never force him back a single step. In that instant, the 3 remaining members charged forward, closing the distance to just a meter. Lin unleashed a flurry of swift cuts, his voice cutting through the chaos as he declared that they had only themselves to blame for their impending defeat. His spear moved with such speed and precision that the warriors barely had time to react. It was only in those final moments that they grasped the inevitability of their fate. There was nothing they could do to withstand his devastating blows. As the dust settled, Lin found himself standing alone once more on the battlefield. He believed that if he could restore order to the country, peace would finally return to his homeland. But the battle had taken its toll. His body was battered and his eyes were heavy with exhaustion. Yet, he knew he couldn't afford to fall. His daughter needed a bone marrow transplant. Suddenly a voice pulled him back to the present. Ray's voice, trembling as she clung to his legs, calling for her father. Joy surged in Lin's heart as he embraced her tightly. She gazed up at him, hardly able to believe that this was truly her father. In that moment, the protagonist vowed to annihilate Xiaoho's entire family if they refused to bow 100 times. The terrified family quickly complied, bowing repeatedly and offering apologies with every breath. Ray cried out, lamenting that everyone around them despised her father, but Lin reassured her, vowing that he would never let anyone harm their family again. Heartbroken, Ray continued to weep, feeling the weight of disbelief as she insisted that her father was a hero. He listened intently, but his gaze faltered as he noticed that her body still hadn't fully recovered. Lin felt a deep worry settle in his chest. He knew he had to remain strong for her. Sensing his internal struggle, the girl asked to be set down. He complied gently, lowering her to the ground while reassuring her that she was fine. As he stroked her head, he urged her softly, "Come home with me." But Ray unveiled a harsh truth. Their grandmother had expelled them, forbidding their return because her mother needed to meet with Uncle Sun. Lin frowned, sensing something was amiss. Ray leaned in, whispering for him to pretend to be asleep once more. He smiled at her cleverness, fully on board with her plan. Returning to the wheelchair, he braced himself to play along. Just as expected, Ray cried out that her father had fallen into this state due to the Gascow family's attack. She turned to the terrified couple, declaring that they would soon confront her uncle, and that would be their doom. With a determined shove, she propelled her father toward the house, while Xiaohei's parents quaked in fear, dreading the demand for compensation. At last, father and daughter arrived at the main entrance. A blonde woman stood in the hallway, her expression twisted in disgust. She wasted no time in berating Ray, reminding her that she had strictly forbidden them from bringing Lin back without her consent. Ray instinctively hid behind the wheelchair, but mustered the courage to speak up, telling her grandmother that she and her father were utterly exhausted. The woman's indifference was palpable. She snapped at the girl to be quiet, pointing at Lin and shouting that she was never to call that cripple her father. Undeterred, the little girl stood her ground, insisting she would always refer to him as father. Just then, Ray heard a strange male voice declare that it would be an honor to spend his life with Shin. Moments later, a tall man stepped out of the house. Lin's expression darkened as his daughter whispered that this was the man her mother had mentioned to Uncle Sun. Just then, his wife Shin entered the room. A young and beautiful woman, she looked visibly upset. "I need time to think about the marriage proposal," she said, her voice trembling. Sun nodded, agreeing to give her the space she needed, but his confidence remained unshaken. He was certain he would win her over in the end. As he turned, he spotted a man and a little girl standing in the yard directly in front of him. Instantly, he recognized the girl as Shin's daughter. Sun approached her, gently patting her cheeks and calling her adorable. Just then, Shin's mother instructed the girl to lead Sun to the door, but the protagonist's wife quickly intervened, refusing the request. Ray's grandmother hurried after Sun, eager to hear how the meeting had gone, leaving her daughter visibly upset. Observing the scene, Ray leaned toward her father and whispered that this man was trying to steal Shin away from them. Just then, her mother approached, gently taking Ray's small hands in hers. With warmth in her voice, Shin expressed her gratitude to Ray for looking after her father that day. The girl began to cry, her voice trembling as she asked if her mother was truly searching for a new father. Shin reassured her, promising that would never happen. As she gently wiped away her daughter's tears, she noticed a mark on the girl's face and inquired if she had been in another fight. Ray, not wanting to add to her mother's worries, lied and shook her head. With a heavy heart, Shin then took both the protagonist and her daughter home. Once they returned home, Ray was sent to her room, leaving her parents alone. Shin sat on the bed facing Lin, grappling with what the right course of action was in this delicate moment. He couldn't shake the thought of whether his wife was aware that he had awakened. Lin's voice broke the silence as she softly confessed that she knew he couldn't hear her and wasn't fully conscious, but she felt compelled to share something with him. Lin's heart raced as he listened, his tension mounting as he struggled to remain hidden. With tears glistening in her eyes, Shin tenderly stroked her husband's hair, whispering that Ray had been saved through his selfless sacrifice. She revealed her deepest wish for their daughter to grow up in a strong and happy family. Through her tears, she confessed that she would even consider marrying Sun if it meant ensuring their daughter would be well cared for. It was a painful decision, but confessing her feelings brought a sense of honesty that she desperately needed with the man she loved most. She stood, offered a heartfelt apology to the silent protagonist, and turned to leave. Meanwhile, Lin reflected on the immense struggles his wife had faced during his long, deep slumber. Just then, a loud knock echoed from the other side of the room, jolting him to the realization that he wasn't alone. Yang, Shin's younger sister, stepped out of the bathroom with a casual air. Lin had no idea his wife was getting married, she remarked, a hint of mischief in her voice. It was clear she enjoyed the surprise. Though Lin kept his expression neutral, a wave of tension coursed through him. Zhang approached his wheelchair, tossed a damp towel aside, and cupped his chin, lamenting, "Such a handsome man, and yet you're wasting away." A melody began to play, pulling her attention away as she lay on the bed, greeting her future brother-in-law. She answered the call, her bare feet resting just in front of Lin. He was acutely aware that she was still naked, but he quickly redirected his focus to the conversation. Sun inquired if her sister had accepted the gifts. Zhang shook her head, but added that sooner or later her sister would be with Sun. He appeared skeptical, so he invited her to choose anything she desired. That was precisely the response she had hoped for. Without hesitation, she requested a bag and a pair of shoes. Sun promised to fulfill her wishes if she agreed to do something for him in return. Zhang nodded in agreement and made her way to her sister's closet. She promised to do whatever he asked. After slipping into a blouse, she playfully suggested that her future brother-in-law should change Shin's wardrobe once they were married. With that, she exited the room, leaving Lin sitting alone in the center, grappling with everything he had just heard. It was difficult to accept that Shin felt compelled to marry this man to ensure Ray's future. The window was open, the curtains dancing gently in the light breeze. Suddenly, a girl appeared in front of his wheelchair. She bowed deeply, expressing her relief that he had finally awakened. Lin recognized her as Xiaoqing and asked, "Aren't you supposed to be guarding the border?" Without lifting her gaze, she replied, "My master is now more important than the border." After their last battle, no one dared to approach the area. Lin listened intently to his subordinate and inquired if she had any further news to share. Shin's expression mirrored her sadness as she revealed that over the past 2 years, he had been surrounded by ill-intentioned individuals, particularly those who sought to take his wife away. She confessed that without his command, she couldn't take action against them. Now, she sought his permission to eliminate all those villains. Lin struggled to contain his anger as he listened. He realized that while he had been recovering, many had already gotten too close. But his primary concern was Sun. He instructed Shin to gather all the information she could about him. She accepted the command without hesitation, vowing to start immediately and deliver everything as soon as possible. Without a sound, the loyal subordinate slipped through the window, vanishing as swiftly as she had appeared. Left alone once more, Lin didn't linger in silence for long. The door creaked open and Ray burst in, her face radiant with joy. She told her mother that, in the fairy tale, the prince kissed Sleeping Beauty, and she awoke. With an innocent smile, Ray promised that if her mother kissed her father, he would wake up too. Shin was at a loss for words, but as she gazed into her daughter's hopeful eyes, she found herself contemplating the idea. Leaning down, she gently explained that it was merely a fairy tale. Ray held on to a secret. Her father was already awake, and she wanted her mother to find out in this tender moment. With determination, she urged her mother to kiss him. Though hesitant, Shin couldn't deny her daughter's heartfelt request. Slowly, she approached her husband, studying his face as if it were a long-lost treasure. It had been ages since she had seen him from this distance. Leaning in, she poured all her love into the kiss, clinging to the flicker of hope deep within her heart that he would finally awaken. Ray peeked through her fingers, anticipating the moment her father would open his eyes, and her mother would be filled with joy, but nothing happened. Lin remained motionless. Turning to her daughter with a pained expression, she gently said that Daddy hadn't woken up and that fairy tales weren't real. Heartbroken, Ray struggled to comprehend why her father wouldn't rise to reveal the truth to her mother. Chin took Ray's hand, her voice trembling as she promised to find a new father who would care for them. But this only fueled Ray's fury. She screamed that her mother was a liar, reminding her that she had vowed no one would ever replace Lin. Sobbing, Ray clutched her father's hand, desperately trying to lift him, pleading for him to wake up. Chin turned away, unable to bear the sight without tears streaming down her cheeks. The little girl was convinced he could hear her, pleading for him to tell her mother that he had already recovered. Inside, Lin fought to remain still. It shattered his heart, but he silently apologized to his daughter. He had to keep up the pretense. Revealing himself now would jeopardize everything. As Ray noticed his lack of response, her sobs grew louder, echoing the pain in his heart. She shouted that he was a liar just like her mother. Chin had no choice but to take her out of the room, pleading with her not to raise her voice at her father. Yet Ray couldn't fathom how her father could let her mother take his place. As time passed, the challenging day gradually drew to a close. Darkness enveloped the house, leaving only one room illuminated by the soft glow of a solitary lamp. Ray eventually drifted off to sleep, tears still glistening in her eyes as she mumbled that everyone around her was a liar. Chin sat silently beside her daughter, guilt pressing down on her heart. Just then, the door creaked open, and Zhang appeared in the doorway. She reminded her older sister about the banquet and asked why she was still at home. Chin remained unresponsive, lost in her thoughts. Zhang grasped her sister's hand, urging her to leave without delay. "Once you marry, son, you'll be able to have everything you've ever wanted," she promised. Chin, desperate for her daughter to stop crying herself to sleep, reluctantly consented to go. Meanwhile, Lin stayed in his room, unaware as Chin slipped back through the open window, an envelope clutched tightly in her hand. She referred to him as master and reported that she had gathered all the information on Sun. Handing over the envelope, she reminded him that today was Ginseng's birthday and Sun was hosting a banquet at the Zhangzhou Hotel where Chin would arrive in about 40 minutes. Lin accepted the envelope with a nod of gratitude for his loyal subordinate and carefully opened it. As he scanned the papers, his expression darkened. He couldn't fathom the depths of depravity to which Sun's family had sunk. Rising from his wheelchair, he commanded Chin to get ready. They were heading to the birthday party together. At the hotel, the two sisters arrived punctually and were greeted warmly by a smiling staff member who confirmed Sun's reservation. A separate room had been prepared for them. As they entered the hall, Jiang was captivated by the extravagant decorations, her eyes lighting up as she pointed excitedly at the grand arch adorned with a birthday message. Meanwhile, Chin couldn't shake off her unease. A man adjusted his glasses, expressing his surprise that his father had booked the entire hotel. Zhang moved closer to her future brother-in-law, laughing and agreeing that he was right. Just then, footsteps echoed in the corridor as a little girl approached Chin, holding a box containing a stunning ring meant for the birthday girl. Zhang's eyes sparkled as she caught sight of the golden ring adorned with a magnificent diamond. Her curiosity piqued to admire it up close. Then, with a heartfelt gesture, Sun knelt and presented the ring, asking Chin to marry him. The staff exchanged whispers, clearly impressed by the lavish amount his family had invested in the engagement. Sun promised to take care of Chin and her family, his gaze filled with expectation. Yet, the weight of that promise tore at Chin's heart, leaving her feeling as if her soul were split in two. She remained silent, caught in a storm of emotions. Nearby, Lin and Chin sat by the piano, observing the unfolding scene with keen interest. Chin hesitated, contemplating whether to step in and deal with the arrogant man, but Lin urged her to hold off, his concern for his wife deepening. Eventually, Chin withdrew her hand from Sun, declaring that the proposal felt too abrupt. She admitted her fears about who would look after Lin. In a moment of panic, Jiang urged her sister to accept. As Sun sensed her hesitation once more, his patience finally snapped. He rose to his feet, chastising her for her ingratitude after everything he had done, renting an entire hotel and promising to care for her daughter. Zhang chimed in, urging her sister to accept the proposal from the wealthy, powerful man. But Chin's anger ignited. How dare Sun criticize her? She turned down his proposal, a firm refusal that ignited his fury. In a fit of rage, Sun grabbed her arm. Chin attempted to flee, but he threatened her, warning that if she didn't comply, her family would face dire consequences. Leaning closer, he whispered that her obedience was the only way to ensure her daughter's safety. With a twisted smirk, he declared that today would mark her wedding day. The crowd erupted in cheers, praising his strength, but the protagonist had seen enough. Lin, still watching from the sidelines, leaned over to Chin and assured her that she would know what to do. In an instant, the girl was behind San. As he moved closer to Chin, she seized his hand, forcing him to face her. With fury in her eyes, she commanded him to stop. The guards hurried to his side, but Sun, wearing a confident smile, waved them off and commanded everyone to leave. The arrogant man believed Chin had intervened out of jealousy, convinced she was envious of his fiancée. With a smirk, he caressed her cheek and mockingly asked if she wanted a hug too. The guards, observing the scene, chuckled, calling Sun talented. But Chin had reached her breaking point. In a flash, she struck his face with such force that his glasses shattered. Sun froze, stunned, as he clutched his cheek in disbelief. Then, fury ignited within him. He barked orders to his guards to finish her off. The men charged at her, shouting that she had no idea what she was up against. However, their confidence evaporated the moment Chin raised her hand. With a subtle flick, she sent the first attacker flying. Without breaking a sweat, she effortlessly dispatched 3 more guards, leaving them sprawled on the floor. The last remaining guard stared in disbelief at his fallen comrades, struggling to comprehend the swift defeat that had just unfolded before him. Furious, Sun bellowed that he was the heir, and this was his family's territory. Chin regarded him with cold disdain, retorting that sons of influential families ought to learn to behave with more humility. Just then, a woman nearby interjected. Her curiosity piqued as she wondered aloud who this girl truly was. Moments later, Chin calmly wished the woman a happy birthday, catching her off guard. Suddenly, a beautiful melody filled the hotel, and a voice called out for everyone to turn their attention to the stage. The sisters turned, stunned, as they beheld a handsome man seated at the piano, playing a breathtaking tune. Jang couldn't tear her gaze away from him, exclaiming how incredibly handsome he was. But Chin recognized him instantly. It was her husband. She reaffirmed to herself that the man on stage was indeed her master. The other woman looked on in confusion, unable to grasp why Chin referred to him in such a way. Meanwhile, Sun's anger surged as he realized someone else had entered the hotel he believed belonged to his family. With a voice like thunder, he called for the manager. The staff hurried to his side as the manager commanded the guards to take charge of the situation. Moments later, a formidable group of hotel security arrived. Sun wore a smug grin, certain that Chin would finally face the consequences of her actions. He pointed at her, barking the order to have her thrown out. But to his shock, the guards turned their attention to Sun instead. To his shock, they seized him and began dragging him out. He screamed and struggled, desperately shouting that he was Sun. The hotel employee offered a cold smile, explaining that there had been no mistake. The entire hotel had been rented by Lin. Initially, Sun tried to maintain his arrogance, but as the reality sank in, panic took hold. The manager turned to Chin, apologizing for the incident, before instructing his staff to remove Sun and his men. They were unceremoniously ejected from the hall, despite his desperate protests. Over the radio, the manager announced that the entire Sun family was now permanently banned from the hotel. Meanwhile, all eyes returned to the man at the piano. Chin found herself captivated by him, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. Could it truly be her husband? Zhang, captivated by the wealthy and handsome man her sister appeared to recognize, eagerly urged Chin to introduce them. However, Chin simply replied that she didn't know him, concealing the truth. Meanwhile, the guests were entranced by the enchanting melody played by Lin. Suddenly, the sound of explosions outside shattered the atmosphere, drawing their attention away from the music. A voice rang out, urging everyone to look up at the sky. As they tilted their heads, gasps filled the air. The night sky erupted in a dazzling array of fireworks, and at the heart of the spectacle was a glowing inscription celebrating the birthday girl. Chin stood in awe, captivated by such a romantic gesture. Hearing Lin's name announced with admiration stirred even deeper feelings within her. A sudden urge surged within her. She had to see for herself if the man at the piano was truly her husband. With a swift turn, she dashed toward him, desperation fueling her every step. But her youngest sister grasped her hand, attempting to hold her back. Chin broke free, sprinting forward with unwavering confidence that Lin would still be there for her. However, when she arrived, the room lay empty, echoing her hopes. The piano sat in silence, a haunting echo of her turmoil. Her heart sank as she grappled with the reasons for his departure. Just then, her sister's calm voice broke through the stillness, informing her that Lin had already gone home. Chin felt a wave of acceptance wash over her. If he was home, then she needed to return as well. Unbeknownst to her, Lin had indeed left the hotel earlier and was already back in their room waiting for her arrival. He instructed Chin to gather all the information about the Jian family and bring it to him. She hesitated, apologizing for her boldness, but insisted that no one needed to know about his awakening. She could manage the situation on her own. The protagonist smiled, teasingly asking if she was genuinely concerned about the repercussions of someone discovering he had awakened. Standing by the window, Chin averted her gaze, unwilling to respond. Suddenly, she spotted Chin entering the house. With a respectful bow, she bid farewell to her master, affirming her commitment to fulfill his orders. Lin quickly changed back into his old clothes, resolved to keep his awakening a secret for a while longer. He despised the deception, especially from his wife, but felt he had no other choice. As Chin stepped inside, she brushed aside her mother's inquiries about the birthday celebration, lost in her own thoughts. Behind her, the woman shouted that nothing had changed in the room and that the cripple was still there. Zhang followed, smugly informing their mother that Qin had been very sick but had managed to succeed tonight. She even showcased a recording of the man who had rented the entire Zhangzhou hotel, proudly announcing that this wealthy man named Lin had done it all for Qin. Their mother scoffed, remarking that now that Qin had found a richer suitor, she no longer needed to marry Sun. Ignoring her, Xin opened the door to her room. Tears welled in her eyes as she softly called out for Lin, hoping to rouse him from his stillness. Her heart shattered at the sight of him, motionless in his wheelchair. Just days ago, she had been certain she had seen him at the hotel, but now her confidence crumbled, and she found herself in tears. Memories flooded back of 5 years ago, when her family had forced her to marry Sun, a man she loathed. She had been overjoyed when her grandfather introduced her to the protagonist. That night, they were married, and soon after, Ray was born, a beacon of hope in their harsh world. But then, tragedy struck. Ray fell ill and required a bone marrow transplant. Lin had come to the rescue, sacrificing his own health in the process. As Xin reflected on it all, tears streamed down her face. Her daughter had been saved, but her husband was left shattered. Kneeling before him, she pleaded for his return, her voice trembling as she confessed she couldn't endure this torment any longer. Lin gazed at his wife, his heart aching with sorrow. In silence, he vowed that she wouldn't have to wait much longer. Meanwhile, Zhang observed with a cold gaze, unable to comprehend what her sister saw in this man, who seemed to rely on everyone around him. Then, a thought struck her. Lin, the wealthy gentleman. A smirk crept across her face as she entered the room, attempting to coax Jin into joining her for a night out at a bar. "No thanks," Jin replied, shaking her head. "I need to get some sleep. I have to take Ray to school tomorrow. We can go out another time." Zhang was relentless, insisting they needed to unwind. Earlier, after the incident, Sun had called her, demanding that she uphold her end of their agreement. Initially hesitant, she eventually caved when he promised he could arrange for the enigmatic Mr. Lin to become her husband. Swayed by his deceit, Zhang agreed to take her sister to the bar that night. She embraced Jin tightly, exclaiming with joy that she was the best sister in the world, all the while secretly advancing her own agenda. Exhausted, Shin finally relented and went to touch up her makeup, blissfully unaware of her sister's ulterior motives. As Shin made her way toward the exit, Jiang cast a sly smile at the protagonist. Leaning closer to Lin, she whispered, "After today, your sister will finally be getting a divorce." After that, she too departed, leaving the protagonist alone in the room. Just then, Shin appeared through the bedroom window, her expression serious. She revealed that she had uncovered all the latest developments concerning the Zhang family, Lin's wife's family. With urgency in her voice, Yins explained that her company was facing a financial crisis. In a surprising twist, she mentioned that her family had promised to elevate their fortunes if Shin agreed to marry her son. At that moment, Lin frowned, remarking that the young man was quite calculating. Now, they would see if Shin could outpace his blade. Shortly after, the hero spotted his wife's cart leaving the house and instructed Shin to keep a close watch on her movements. Meanwhile, at the love bar, Shin sat at the counter, a cheerful smile on his face. The waitstaff noticed his upbeat demeanor and eagerly filled his glass, asking if he had any good news to share. The man laughed heartily, announcing that he had great news, and those around him quickly offered their congratulations. Just then, the Zhang sisters entered the bar. Shin turned to them, asking if they had arrived at the right place. The men glanced at the sisters, captivated by their beauty. With a joyful smile, Shin began to make his way toward the girls. At that moment, Jin declared that she hadn't come to see him and demanded an explanation for his presence. His younger sister, sensing the tension, desperately tried to defuse the situation. It was then that Shin realized his sister had conspired with this man to lure her to the bar. Determined to make amends, Shin bowed to the girl, acknowledging his impulsiveness. He offered a heartfelt apology and expressed his desire to talk things over. The protagonist's wife silently acknowledged that her family still needed Jin, which made it impossible for her to sever that bond. In response, Sun promised that it wouldn't happen again. Yet, the man couldn't shake the thought that he was just biding his time, waiting for the moment he could pull the girl into his embrace. He approached the counter, grabbed a glass, and began pouring wine. Seizing the moment while Shin's attention was elsewhere, he discreetly dropped a pill into the glass. Sun then turned to the girl, offering her the drink as an apology, but Shin quickly interjected, refusing to let her accept it since he was driving. Undeterred, his sister chimed in, suggesting that the girl should at least take a small sip to show that she had forgiven him. Zhang took hold of the girl and assured her that nothing would happen. Jin accepted the glass, raising it to her lips and downing its contents in one swift gulp. A satisfied smile spread across Zhang's face as he turned to Sun, declaring that now he must believe in his sister's sincerity. Sun beamed with joy, his mind racing with thoughts of how he would win the girl over. A few moments later, the protagonist's wife felt a pang of guilt and attempted to tell her sister they needed to leave. However, the arrogant man shoved her aside and positioned himself next to her. Without hesitation, he swept the girl into his arms. Jean struggled against him, but despite the crowd in the bar, everyone wore smiles, oblivious to her plight. Even her sister, witnessing the scene unfold, made no move to intervene. Suddenly, Sin reported that she had been captured. Lin quickly ordered his subordinate to find out which hotel she was being held in. Moments later, he learned that she was at the Grand Milky Way Hotel. Furious, Lin commanded Shin to assess the situation, but he was determined to confront the main issue himself. Meanwhile, Sun took the girl to a hotel not far from the bar. Jin felt a wave of confusion wash over her. She struggled to grasp her surroundings and the intentions of the man looming over her. All she wanted was to go home, but Sun dismissed her pleas, insisting that she had simply had too much to drink and knew exactly what was happening in the hotel. With a firm grip, he cupped her chin and declared, "Tonight, we're going to sleep together." The girl refused to back down, shoving the man away with determination. A wild grin spread across Sun's face as he remarked, surprised by her unexpected strength. He began to utter lewd comments, his intentions clear. Grabbing her hand, he leaned in closer, taunting her that escape was impossible with so many of his men surrounding them. The protagonist's wife was filled with disgust and attempted to fight back. The girl realized she had to resist with every ounce of strength she had. Seizing an opportunity, she bit the man on the ear, provoking his anger. He yanked her hair and shouted that if she persisted, she would face a dreadful fate. Sun then tightened his grip around her throat, accusing her of being at fault for refusing to marry him. In that moment, Sin's thoughts were consumed by her husband. Suddenly, the protagonist appeared at the door, catching Sun off guard. Not recognizing him, she shouted that he had entered the wrong room. The man's imposing presence was enough to send a chill down her spine as he warned Sun that if she dared to touch him again, he would send her entire family to the cemetery. Shin could hardly believe her eyes. Her husband was standing right in front of her. Sun was caught off guard as Lin's fist connected with his face, sending him sprawling to the ground. Dazed, he took a moment to assess this unexpected visitor, puzzled by how someone in a wheelchair could have gotten here. Defeated, he remained on the ground, accepting his fate. Now, in addition to the abrasion on his cheek, he sported a new black eye, a testament to his unexpected encounter. He was convinced that the two of them were plotting against him. This ridiculous notion ignited a fire of anger within the protagonist. Suddenly, Sun rose to his feet, his legs trembling, and declared that he would be rescued. For some inexplicable reason, the man felt a surge of superiority and began to taunt Sun, insisting that a cripple like him could never stand up to someone of his caliber. With a menacing glare, he threatened Lin, warning that he would harm his wife and daughter if he dared to lay a finger on him. Unable to contain himself, the protagonist demanded to know what nonsense Sun was spouting. Lin resolved to keep his response measured this time, opting for a warning instead. Just then, Sun pulled out his phone, vowing to uncover the true non-entity soon. But before he could make a call, Lin swiftly intercepted his hand. "Is this the same hand you used to touch Chin?" Lin inquired, a hint of challenge in his voice. Lin twisted the man's arm, eliciting a cry of pain. "My family won't let this end easily," he gasped. In response, the protagonist struck him hard, sending him to his knees. Lin coldly replied that he had no interest in the man's influential family. With that, the protagonist turned to leave, warning that if the man dared to cause trouble again, he would show no mercy. At that moment, Chen felt her eyelids growing heavy, making it a struggle to stay awake. Her husband approached, gently removing his jacket to drape it over her. "I'm here now," Lin reassured her. "Everything will be fine." Yet his words offered little comfort as she reminded him, "But you'll go to prison for murder." Sun's spirits lifted at the girl's words, filling him with newfound confidence. He couldn't resist teasing Lin, but the protagonist approached once more, coldly stating that, in his eyes, Sun was less than human. With a swift motion, he shoved Sun to the ground. Desperation crept into Sun's voice as he begged for mercy, but the protagonist merely smirked, declaring that he wouldn't destroy him just yet. Sun still had some usefulness. With that, Lin finally lifted her foot off the man, leaving him to contemplate his fate. His entire body shook as he asked Lin what she wanted. The hero glared at the man who had dared to bring his wife against her will to a hotel room. With a steely resolve, he declared that it was time to teach Sun a lesson. The man attempted to persuade Lin to back down, but the hero's foot came down on his most vulnerable point, eliciting a scream of agony. Satisfied that he had fulfilled his duty, the protagonist turned away, leaving Sun writhing on the ground. He cradled his wife in his arms, and slowly, she regained consciousness. Her eyes met Lin's, filled with joy at being saved. Yet, a flicker of fear crossed Chin's mind. What if this was all just a dream? Lin reassured her, promising that it was real and apologizing for being late. He leaned in and kissed her gently, then turned to Chin, stating that he would take his wife home to see a doctor. Chin smiled with satisfaction. In just 2 years, the world had moved on from the memory of Supreme Lin following the accident. But now, he had recovered and was making his presence felt once again, starting with the destruction of Sun's family. After a while, Lin entered the room and noticed his daughter still peacefully asleep. He leaned over the mattress, and as his hands brushed against her, the girl stirred and slowly awakened. Suddenly, Rui spotted her father and rushed to embrace him, tears streaming down her face. She confessed her deep fear of losing him. Concerned for his health, she couldn't shake her worries. However, her father reassured her, gently explaining that he was simply tired and that it was time for them to rest. He promised her that her mother would return shortly. As the man turned to head toward the bedroom, the girl suddenly grasped his hand. Rui's expression was troubled, her heart heavy with a fear that her father might leave her during the night. After all, he had already lied to her once. With a deep breath, the protagonist knelt down to her level and confessed that his plans had changed. "But you must promise me," he urged gently. "No matter what, you can't tell anyone that I woke up." Rui vowed to keep the secret, even from her mother. Together with her father, they swore to protect it. Meanwhile, a doctor at the hospital meticulously examined the test results of one of her patients. She entered Sun's room and revealed that surgery was his only option. However, the risks to his life were alarmingly high. The young heir couldn't shake the feeling that his time was running out. Suddenly, the doctor delivered the devastating news. Amputation was the only option. The man's anguished scream echoed throughout the hospital as he vowed to make Lin pay for this fate. Meanwhile, Jin lay peacefully asleep in her room, her daughter waiting patiently by her side. At that moment, Shin slowly opened her eyes, realizing she was back in her familiar surroundings. Suddenly, Rui's voice broke through her thoughts, sending a wave of dizziness through Shin's mind. Her daughter giggled, teasing her about being a true sleeper. In that moment, memories of the previous night flooded back, and Shin's gaze shifted to her husband. There he was, as always, in his wheelchair, overwhelmed with emotion. Tears streamed down her face as she grappled with the painful belief that everything had been just a dream, and that the man who had saved her was someone else entirely. Rui gently cupped his mother's face in his small hands, urging her not to cry, assuring her that her father would always protect them. Just then, Shin's mother burst into the room, demanding to know who had given her daughter the pill. Shin wrapped her arms around her mother, whispering that someone had slipped something into her wine. But thankfully, someone had managed to save her. The woman spun around, prepared to confront the one who dared to tarnish her daughter's honor. But she halted abruptly, her expression shifting as she asked if Shin was truly referring to Shin. The protagonist's wife was absolutely convinced of the man's guilt. She reaffirmed her stance, but her sister interjected, insisting that it was all a misunderstanding. It seemed futile for Shin to defend himself, especially since he was set to marry her. Shin felt a deep urge to protect her sister, knowing she was the one who had taken her to that bar, a secret that must remain hidden. Just then, their mother interjected, suggesting that Shin must be mistaken. Rui, unable to contain his anger, shouted at his grandmother, insisting that their mother never lies. The old woman glared at him, raising her fist in a threatening manner, and warned him to be quiet when adults were speaking. The protagonist seethed with anger, yet he knew he had to remain hidden. Just then, the woman's phone rang, sending a shiver of fear through her. It was Shin calling, and she felt a rush of uncertainty. Taking a deep breath, she answered the call. Shin's voice was cold and commanding as he instructed her to meet him at his house, warning that if she didn't, the entire Jian family would vanish without a trace. The conversation came to an abrupt halt. Shin's mother pleaded with her to acknowledge the mistake and apologize, hoping to salvage the family's unity. Though deeply troubled by her family's stance, the girl felt compelled to comply. Rui, on the other hand, was unsettled by the idea of her mother being pressured into apologizing to the aggressor. It felt profoundly unjust to her. After a while, Lin and Rui found themselves alone together. The girl asked her father to let her mother know he was fine. In response, the protagonist urged his daughter to take him to the park, where he planned to confront the bandits and teach them a lesson, one that would spare her mother from being scolded by grandma. That was his primary goal. Rui beamed with excitement at the idea, but her father reminded her that this little adventure had to remain a secret. Meanwhile, Shin's father watched his son with a furrowed brow. His wife, tears streaming down her face, lamented that she couldn't bear to see anyone hurt her only child. Frustrated, he snapped back that tears wouldn't change a thing. He believed she had coddled Shin too much, turning him into a disappointment who was tarnishing the family's reputation, all because of her overindulgence. Shin attempted to persuade his father that he had been ambushed. However, his father was furious, dismissing his son's claims as signs of incompetence. In contrast, Shin's mother believed him, sensing that the Jin family was plotting something against them. The father approached the window, reflecting on his unfounded assumptions. He noted that the Jin family was small and posed no real threat, despite the presence of someone lurking in the shadows. Nevertheless, he felt it was crucial to interrogate Shin. Shin, unwavering, maintained that he had been attacked by the crippled husband of the Jin family. The father, fueled by anger, vowed that if he ever found the man, he would break both his legs and arms. The family conversation was abruptly cut short as the protagonist entered the house, an overwhelming and oppressive aura radiating from him. He demanded to know just how much trouble they had caused to warrant hiring so many guard dogs. Startled, the woman quickly ducked behind her husband, who then asked, "Who is Lin? And why has he come to our home?" From the bed, Shin suddenly sprang up, shouting, "It's the same Lin who assaulted me." The father glared at the protagonist, acknowledging his audacity to break into his home. "You got a lot of courage," he remarked, his voice dripping with disdain. The hero surveyed the room, his eyes filled with contempt for those gathered, convinced they were unworthy of his wife's apology. Shin's father raised his hand, commanding his men to seize the insolent intruder at once. But Lin, wearing a satisfied smile, interjected, "Your men may not be able to stand up to me, but I can certainly give you time to call for backup." The man seethed with fury, vowing that he would not let this go unpunished. He warned the protagonist that he had one last chance to save his own life. Lin, however, was unfazed by such empty threats. With a hint of annoyance, he questioned the man's confidence in his own words. Without hesitation, Lin crossed the room, positioning himself behind the man who dared to threaten him. In an instant, he delivered a swift blow to the head of the family, sending him crashing to the floor. The protagonist swiftly asserted that he could escape any consequence. The woman, witnessing this, felt a surge of panic akin to her husband's. She wanted to shout at him, but as soon as Lin glanced in his direction, he silenced himself, covering his mouth with his hand. Struggling to rise from the ground, the man declared defiantly that he didn't care who stood behind Lin. He would eliminate them all. The protagonist stepped forward, confronting the man with a chilling declaration. He was just as worthless as his son. The son, paralyzed with fear, stared at his father's adversary, horrified by the realization that this man seemed more monster than human. Lin radiated a demonic aura that sent shivers down the spines of his opponents. Gripping the old man by the throat, he was met with desperate cries for mercy. In a frantic plea, a woman fell to Lin's feet, promising to pay any price to save him. Son came to the harsh realization that without his father's support, the company would crumble. Desperate, he pleaded with him to let him go, promising not to disturb Shin any further. Lin, however, found Son's attempts at peaceful resolution utterly absurd. With a swift motion, he tossed Son aside. The father landed on the floor, struggling to clear his throat, while his wife looked on, worry etched across her face. In that moment, Lin gave the family a stark ultimatum. They had one day to offer their sincere apologies to the Yins, or his family would vanish without a trace. He warned them not to breathe a word of his visit, for if they did, they too would face the same fate. The father, gripped by a wave of anxiety, absorbed the weight of the boy's chilling words. As the office door closed behind Lin, the family was left in a suffocating silence, the gravity of their situation settling heavily upon them. The head of the family seized with humiliation, vowing that Lin would not escape unpunished. Consumed by rage, he resolved to gather allies to bring down the Jian family. Rising from the ground, he began making the necessary calls, while his wife cautiously checked the hallway of their home. However, instead of delivering orders, the old man was met with unwelcome news that would change everything. All the investors had suddenly withdrawn their support, and banks ceased issuing loans. The old man's phone slipped from his grasp as he struggled to comprehend how his company, worth hundreds of millions, could collapse in a single day. Meanwhile, his son, wrapped in a blanket, looked up at him, desperately trying to understand what they should do next. The man was deeply lost in thought about Lin's origins and how such a thing could be possible. Sun, too, was baffled. After all, the Jian family relied on his father's wealth. Suddenly, the father threw the blanket aside, his voice rising in anger. He declared that his corporations were the culmination of his life's work, insisting that Sun take the money, and rushed to apologize to Shin. Sun struggled to comprehend that his own father was demanding he make amends. The man was seething with rage, shaking Son as he shouted that if the girl didn't forgive him, he would ruin his life. Just then, Shin's mother emerged from the house, commanding her to comply with all of Son's family's demands. Otherwise, we'll be in deep trouble, she warned. Jin, feeling too weak to stand up to his mother, reluctantly nodded in agreement. As they approached the gate, the woman urged Shin to adopt a more benevolent expression. However, their departure was halted by the sight of the young master's son, kneeling just outside. Jin's mother rushed to help him to his feet, attempting to persuade him that it was her daughter's fault that led to this moment. Sun threw Li's hand away and began shouting that the events of yesterday were entirely his fault, pleading for her forgiveness. Jin couldn't shake the feeling that this was some sort of trap. Desperate, the boy tugged at the hem of the girl's skirt, begging her to forgive him and promising he would never trouble her again. Li, feeling a wave of disgust, replied coldly that she would only consider forgiving him if he truly stayed out of her life for good. Sun burst into tears of joy, vowing that he would never trouble her again. His unexpected reaction took her by surprise, leaving her puzzled about the impact of her words. Along with his heartfelt apologies, the boy handed over a check for 1 million as a gesture of moral compensation. Without hesitation, Li accepted the check, while Shin simply stated that he never wanted to see the man again. In a flash, Son was gone. Li sought to uncover who had assisted his daughter in navigating a family as powerful as the Sun's. However, the girl had no answers to her mother's inquiries. After some contemplation, the woman concluded that their benefactor must have been yesterday's savior, who had proven to be quite influential. Meanwhile, Sun fled from the Jian family home, hoping that everything would turn out all right and that he could rectify the situation. As he continued on his way, he unexpectedly encountered Lin and her young daughter. The protagonist cast a menacing glare at Sun, who nervously reported that Shin had accepted his apology and inquired if there were any further orders. Lin, however, simply expressed her hope that they would never cross paths again. Just as the young man was about to leave, Lin's voice halted him in his tracks. With a chilling calmness, the protagonist reminded him that if he dared to speak of their encounter, it would spell disaster for his entire family. Overcome with fear, San dropped to his knees, desperately promising to keep Lin's secret. Meanwhile, Sin's mother relentlessly urged her to divorce her loser husband, insisting that there were plenty of good men available and no reason to cling to someone so useless. She attempted to manipulate Shin, pressuring her to consider her own feelings. Just then, Ray returned home with his father and stumbled upon his mother. Jin was taken aback when she spotted her daughter with Len. Ray chimed in, explaining that she had brought her father to Sun Bath. The protagonist's wife immediately enveloped her daughter in a warm embrace, showering her with praise for being so clever. However, the old woman scoffed, dismissing her daughter's joy with a disdainful sound. Leaning closer to her mother, the girl whispered that her father had taken care of the bad uncles, but that was a secret just between them. Zin stared at her daughter, momentarily taken aback by her words. But soon, laughter bubbled up, and she promised to take her to school, just the two of them. After a while, Ray prepared for school and paused to check on his father before heading out, wanting to ensure he was all right. Lin watched her family with a warm smile, grateful to be part of their lives, even in their current circumstances. Just as the girls departed, King walked in. A moment later, the main character turned to the woman and requested to be taken out of the house. He longed to see his daughter off to school. Meanwhile, we catch a glimpse of Ray, who tells her mother that she wishes her father could pick her up after school. Jin had promised her a reward for good behavior. Just then, Xiaohu's family appeared at the school gate, smugly blocking the entrance, their presence a clear challenge. Jin embraced her daughter tightly, steeling herself for what was to come. "Why are you here?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the rising tension. The man gestured to his own forehead, accusing Lin of causing his injury. This time, he vowed, "You won't get away so easily." The woman chimed in, her tone sharp as she declared that they were seeking 200,000 for moral damages. Cradling Xiaohu in her arms, she added, "My child hasn't eaten and has lost weight over the past 2 days because of fear. Xiao Hu's father stood his ground, unwavering. Shin swiftly retorted that such a thing was impossible. As he approached, his voice rose in anger, declaring that whether she believed him or not, he would make sure to finish off her ex. Ray stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority as she threatened to call her father if the situation escalated any further. In that instant, the man sensed Lin's menacing aura once more, and a wave of fear washed over him. Realizing he didn't want to face another beating, he quickly gathered his family and fled the scene. His wife was puzzled. Why were they fleeing when the man had promised to handle the situation with the disabled man? Yet the head of the family couldn't shake off a nagging sense of dread. The protagonist reassured himself that he would have another chance in the future. Just then, Jin leaned down to his daughter and whispered that it was time to go. Moments later, Principal Yang approached the school gate, her expression serious as she called out to Shin, saying they needed to talk. She was uncertain about the purpose of their meeting. Yang proposed they head to the office to discuss everything in detail. The girl couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was somehow related to her daughter. Upon arriving at the office, Yang revealed that Ray's academic contract was set to expire this year, and they needed to discuss plans for the following year. Shin was taken aback. How could this be? They had agreed on a 2-year term, and yet only 6 months had passed. The director hesitated, mumbling about the limited number of seats and the absence of reservations. But Shin quickly reminded him that she had already paid $50,000 when they finalized the deal. With a sigh, the man sat down and clarified that the $50,000 was merely an advance payment for admission. This revelation infuriated Shin. She had thought that money covered her entire first year of study. The director, however, simply chuckled at her frustration. He was convinced she had fallen for his ruse. Then Yang began to speak, offering to help her secure a spot at the school. The catch? She would need to pay him $1,000, with his commission added on top. The man realized this option was a dead end for her. He knew she didn't have that kind of money, but Shin was willing to hear out the second option. Yang casually propped her feet on the table and remarked that she had heard about her husband's condition, hoping he wouldn't need to elaborate on the details. Meanwhile, Zhen was seething at the principal's words. She slammed her hands on the table, her voice sharp as she called him disgusting. Yang, adjusting her glasses with a calm demeanor, stated that her daughter would not be attending the preparatory school on his terms. Jin refused to be swayed by the man's schemes and resolved to transfer his daughter to another school. Yang, visibly irritated, retorted that none of the prestigious prep schools in the city would accept her without his consent. He declared that the girl would return the next day, begging for her place back. Meanwhile, Cheng reassured the protagonist, highlighting the school's excellent environment and the substantial amount Shin had invested for his daughter's education here. Suddenly, something caught Ching's attention. He turned to Lin toward the exit of the school and spotted his wife fleeing in tears. A sinking feeling washed over him as he realized that things hadn't gone as planned in the principal's office. Determined to find out what had happened, he decided to investigate for himself. Just then, Ai Xiaohu's father stepped into the principal's office, and Ching could see the nervous tension etched across Yang's face. He attempted to mask his true feelings, forcing a smile as he greeted the family. In reality, he was more concerned about maintaining his relationship with Ju than genuinely welcoming them. As one of the wealthiest individuals in the area, their influence was undeniable. They swiftly voiced their desire to have a little girl expelled from school. The principal, realizing they were referring to Rui, reluctantly confirmed that by the end of the semester she would no longer be attending. However, the family was far from pleased with this decision. Ju quickly offered $1 million to ensure the girl left immediately. The principal, eager to resolve the situation, couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement at the prospect of making a fortune so easily. Just then, the door to the boardroom swung open with a loud bang, drawing everyone's attention to Lin. The principal, underestimating the gravity of the moment, attempted to assert his authority, unaware of the storm he was about to face. The mere sight of Lin sent a shiver of fear through the couple. They were all too familiar with him. Meanwhile, Yang remained oblivious to the tension, focused instead on uncovering Lin's purpose for being there. Ju received another harsh slap across the face, and his wife braced herself, certain that their situation was about to take a turn for the worse. The director, growing increasingly anxious, attempted to dismiss Lin, but his efforts were met with resistance. He felt a wave of fear wash over him when Lin threatened to cut out his tongue if he uttered another word. Shaken, the protagonist turned back to confront Ju, demanding to know why he had stopped. With a swift motion, he pinned Ju's hands to the ground, warning him that if he dared to lay a finger on his wife, he would lose his hands in return. Lin shot a meaningful glance at the woman, and in that moment, she understood that she was in danger as well. The woman knelt down, acknowledging their mistake. Lin agreed to let the family go, but only on the condition that they leave town today. The director was baffled by the extent of Lin's authority. The family accepted the terms and quickly fled. Once they were gone, the protagonist settled onto the couch, turning to the director with a steely gaze. "Now I'm giving you the chance to explain why you're so fixated on my daughter." It was only after those words that the director recognized the man in his office as Ray's father. Yet, for some inexplicable reason, he believed he could intimidate Lin. With a menacing tone, he declared that he would only allow his daughter to stay in the institution if Lin agreed to sleep with his wife. Lin's anger surged as he leaped off the couch, delivering a swift kick that shattered the man's glasses. Yang lay on the floor, clutching his cheek, his entire body trembling in disbelief at the sudden turn of events. In a fit of rage, he fumbled for his phone, vowing to make Lin pay for this humiliation. But before he could make the call, the office door burst open and an unexpected intruder stormed in. The director rushed in, desperate for assistance in handling the situation. But his boss's face was a mask of fury. The school owner had discovered the principal's actions and questioned how he could exploit his authority for personal gain. He added, with a pointed glare, that he was aware of the remarks made to Lin's wife. Yang stood in disbelief, unable to comprehend that he was being fired. The boss, unwilling to face the repercussions of his subordinate's mistakes, made the decisive choice to dismiss the principal. He ordered Yang to leave the city. The headmaster felt utterly defeated, struggling to comprehend how a mere vegetable could wreak such havoc on his life. The boss shoved the former headmaster, demanding an immediate apology to the master, warning him that failure to comply would lead to dire consequences. Turning to Lin, the boss offered an apology and vowed to rectify the situation at once. However, Lin remained unimpressed. He was more than capable of handling his own problems. The boss noticed the former director's silence and coldly declared that he would not come to his aid. In that moment, Yang began to frantically apologize. The hero leaned in closer, his voice steady as he said, "You're gravely mistaken, Yang. You believe you can manipulate others with your wealth and power, but from now on, you'll have neither. All that awaits you now is a life of begging." The boss acknowledged that this punishment was warranted and assured Lin that his daughter would receive a better education. The man felt immense relief that the mayor had intervened just in time to save his life. Lin chose to step back, requesting everyone present to keep his appearance a secret. The men vowed to remain silent, but the incident made it clear that someone in higher circles was already aware of his awakening. Meanwhile, Shin strolled through the park, feeling as though all her problems had suddenly come crashing down on her. Just then, her younger sister appeared beside her, asking if she was heading to the company. Shin opened up about her dilemma. She needed to come up with a staggering $1,004,000 for school fees. Her sister, ever the pragmatist, suggested it was a matter of status and brought up the son, which sent a wave of fury through Shin. She turned her back on her sister, declaring that from that day forward, they would sever all ties with their family. In that tense moment, Zhang mentioned that she had heard about her sister's mysterious boyfriend from their mother and suggested seeking his help. However, Shin urged her to drop the subject. Zhang couldn't help but think her sister was foolish for clinging to a man who was stagnant instead of pursuing someone with real influence. After their brief conversation, Zhang departed, leaving her sister to face her problems alone. A little later, she found herself at a nearby cafe with Sun. Observing his condition, she mistakenly thought he was unwell. Sun, however, was furious, convinced that Zhang might be a threat to him. Confused by his anger, Zhang clarified that her only intention was to remind him not to fall behind if he wanted to reach his sister. Sun smiled, remarking that the girl truly wanted to take him to the grave. The younger sister recalled that the man had competition, and in her eyes, he was the best candidate. After hearing this, Sun expressed his gratitude, but his demeanor shifted, becoming unsettlingly intense. Sensing the change, Jiang decided it was time to distance herself. "Since you've given up," she declared, "I'm leaving." Sun watched the girl walk away before calling her friends, excitedly announcing that he had a promising job opportunity for them. Meanwhile, Zhang strolled down the street, bemused by how easily the young heir seemed to give up. The girl, feeling dejected, realized she wouldn't be getting her bag back. Unbeknownst to her, two guys were trailing closely behind, but she remained oblivious to their presence. The boys studied the girl intently, expressing their gratitude to Sun for his efforts. They promised to have plenty of fun with Zhang. Moments later, they approached her, laughter spilling from their lips as they asked if she was walking alone. Zhang felt a surge of fear, unable to grasp their intentions. The boys scrutinized her, their laughter echoing as they brazenly declared their desire for her body. At that moment, King turned to the protagonist and asked if she should save the girl. However, he chose to teach Zhang a lesson first. Lin understood that the blonde was willing to do anything for money, but she was still his wife's family. He wanted to see if she truly needed his help. Meanwhile, the boys dragged the girl into an alley, where she pleaded for her release, promising to pay any amount for her freedom. But Sun had already paid for the work, and they didn't want to squander such an incredible opportunity for fun. When Zhang heard Sun's name, confusion washed over her. Why would the person she had helped want to harm her? In a panic, the girl screamed, desperate to escape, but her cries only seemed to delight the boys. Her clothes were torn, leaving her vulnerable, and Zhang's heart raced as she cried out, begging for help. In that moment, Qing, a formidable warrior, effortlessly incapacitated the white-haired man with a single strike. Without breaking a sweat, she then knocked out her partner Jing, who was sitting on the ground shielding herself. Shang glanced at the girl she had just rescued and told her not to thank her. With a firm tone, she instructed Zhang to stay out of her older sister's affairs, warning that if she didn't, she wouldn't come to help again. After speaking those words, the girl exited the alley, leaving Jiang alone in her thoughts. Tears streamed down her face as she pondered why that woman had addressed her as sister, and, more importantly, who the master was that had sent her. Jiang wrapped her arms around herself, guilt gnawing at her for compelling her sister to remain with Sun. Meanwhile, Qing returned to the protagonist's side, both of them hoping that the girl had gained some insight from the encounter. Qing nodded in agreement and informed the protagonist about the upcoming Benhai feast. However, Lin firmly denied any intention of attending. Just then, a guard approached the Sun, delivering alarming news. 2 of his men had been eliminated. Lin's surprise was palpable as the realization sank in that those 2 had failed their mission. The man refused to be deterred by his previous failure, vowing that Zhang's downfall was inevitable. He devised a clever plan to deal with Zhang and reached out to his good friend Lu for assistance. As time passed, the celebration of Benhai drew near. Meanwhile, Sun reappeared at Qing's house, insisting he had come with nothing but good intentions. Qing's mother, oblivious to the underlying tension, cheerfully supported his claims. Sun inquired if the girls were aware of Benhai's upcoming celebration in 2 weeks. The mother's eyes lit up with excitement. This event was of great significance, and she hoped he would take them along. Sun, however, explained that his family hadn't received an invitation, making it impossible for him to bring her, but he made a promise to introduce a friend who could take them instead. Lin's wife, clearly frustrated, stood up from her seat and declared her disinterest. But Li wasn't ready to let his daughter walk away so easily. He grabbed her firmly, urging her to seize this incredible opportunity. As the woman attempted to persuade her daughter, Li's mind raced with a plan of his own. If Zhang agreed to join the celebration, he would take both sisters along with him. Suddenly, Rui appeared alongside his father. Sun hadn't anticipated the demon's return so soon, and anxiety washed over him. He bowed to the girls, urging them to inform him of their decision as quickly as possible. Li asserted that it was Zhang's responsibility to accept the invitation. However, Zhang, still wary after the recent incident, expressed his reluctance to trust Sun so readily. She descended the stairs and shared the news with her mother, but Li's anger flared. She was convinced that the young master would never stoop so low. Zhang chose not to argue, yet a seed of doubt took root in her heart, whispering that the criminals might strike again. Just then, Ye Qin chimed in, mentioning that her grandfather had called for both her and Zhang to come to the main house. Li's expression darkened at the thought. She couldn't fathom why the man would want her daughter involved. Sun replied that she wasn't aware of all the details, but she felt it was essential to leave as soon as possible. The main house of the Jiang family was far more expansive than the country house. At the head of the table, the grandfather grumbled about how the family had not received an invitation to the celebration. The young man observed that despite their business thriving this year, the influential family still seemed indifferent to them. The blonde man glanced at Sun, subtly suggesting that someone could assist them in drawing attention. Sun was taken aback, realizing that even this branch of her family relied on her. Although her grandfather hadn't shown much concern for Sun in recent years, he reminded her that he had always been there to provide financial support when necessary. With his arms crossed, the old man stated that he needed her to do him a favor. She thought her grandfather was joking. She truly had no idea what she could possibly do. The blonde man scoffed, questioning whether she truly didn't want to help the family. Her cousin chimed in, accusing her of pretending to be clueless. Sun felt overwhelmed, convinced that she couldn't solve a problem that even the head of the family struggled with. But the old man clarified that an influential figure was interested in her and could help them gain access to the party. Sun's anxiety deepened as she voiced her fears, convinced that no one would be interested in her because she already had a child. Her cousin shot her a sarcastic smile, suggesting that the girl should be grateful for the opportunity. The uncle joined in on the teasing, and the atmosphere grew tense. Suddenly, the wife sprang from her seat, declaring that she was a married woman, not a plaything. But her protests fell flat, as the uncle retorted, "Better to be a toy than to serve a vegetable." Sin stood firm, determined to defend her husband's honor. The grandfather rapped his knuckles on the table, promising that if his granddaughter complied with his request, the family would never forget her sacrifice. But Sin's resolve was unyielding. She declared that she would not allow anyone to strip her of her dignity, nor would she permit the use of her body for such purposes. "I will honor my husband," she asserted. "If anyone wishes to pursue this plan, they can do so alone." Sin was bewildered by the old man's audacity to make such a request. He refused to take no for an answer. Meanwhile, the cousin started to pressure the girl, warning her about the potential consequences of her choices. Yet, the protagonist's wife stood her ground, firmly asserting that only she had the right to decide what to do with her own body. Suddenly, the cousin turned his threats towards Sin, ominously suggesting that harm could come to her husband. The girl's jealousy of Sin's beauty was palpable, as she repeatedly questioned what others saw in her. Seizing the moment, she shoved Sin onto the table, then tossed her aside. In that tense moment, the cousin shouted that this was Sin's final chance to make the right decision, warning that the lives of her loved ones hung in the balance. Though it pained her deeply, Sin ultimately chose to set aside her principles for the sake of her daughter and husband's safety. The grandfather waved his hand toward her, vowing to save his family's life if the girl received an invitation to the celebration. Frustrated, she stormed out of the main house of the Jeans family. A while later, Sin returned home and made his way to the park, where he found her sitting on a swing. She decided it was time to share her grandfather's ominous words with him. Sin informed Lin that someone influential had taken an interest in her. She understood that she had to entertain this person if she wanted to avoid trouble for the protagonist and his daughter. Regretfully, Lin admitted she would need to secure a ticket, otherwise her family would be in jeopardy. With a heavy heart, she embraced her husband, expressing her reluctance to betray him, yet acknowledging that she wasn't prepared to lose them. She apologized to Lin, knowing it was the only way to protect them. The protagonist, furious at how his wife was treated, felt blue flames flicker to life in his hands. Lin gently put his wife to sleep, settling her into a chair. With a fierce determination, the protagonist vowed to catch anyone who dared to intimidate her. Just then, the king appeared nearby, bowing respectfully, ready to fulfill any request. Lin resolved to step out of the shadows. She woke up with determination and instructed Qing to announce her presence at the Binhai celebration. Meanwhile, Egg Sin's mother was taken aback to find her husband at home. Just then, her cousin introduced a young man named Liu Xiao. He settled beside Li, gently smoothing her hair as she struggled to grasp the unfolding situation. At that moment, the grandfather urged her to call Sin quickly. They couldn't keep someone as influential as Lu waiting. Li explained that her daughter had taken Ray to school, then inquired about their presence. The cousin revealed that Liu Xiao had a fondness for Egg Sin, so as long as the girl didn't cause any trouble, the Jian family wouldn't require anything more. Li was filled with joy, but his cousin's contemptuous remark cut through the moment. It was all thanks to her grandfather's efforts. A few minutes later, the sisters returned home. Liu Xiao began to admire the girls, praising Jinyan for her choices. However, Zhang's happiness waned as she spotted her grandfather, who had previously promised to leave them alone. With a proud demeanor, he introduced Li Yu, declaring that he was the one Sin should accompany. The man cleared his throat, expressing his anticipation for their upcoming meeting. Li approached the eldest daughter, firmly instructing her not to squander this valuable opportunity. The grandfather frowned at his granddaughter's behavior, disappointed that she had failed to greet their guest. However, Lu dismissed the concern, remarking that shyness on a first encounter is completely normal. The man took a deep breath, ready to introduce himself and mention the company he owned, but Sin turned away in disdain. The old man struggled to hold back his frustration, resisting the urge to put Egg Sin in his place. Lu frowned at the scene and questioned whether the family was truly welcoming him. Meanwhile, cousin Yan struck Shen and exclaimed that she had no right to behave that way. The girl stood over the protagonist's wife, demanding that she apologize to Lu immediately. Just then, Lu interjected, noting that securing tickets had become significantly more challenging. Meanwhile, Shin sat on the couch, covering his cheek as he faced the threat of missing out on the invitation. The cousin clung to Liu, confidently assuring him that their grandfather would handle everything. A menacing smile crept across Lu's face as he declared that he would need one more person. Li quickly chimed in, suggesting that Jian should accompany him. Jian wasn't thrilled by the idea, but their grandfather merely lit a cigarette and remarked that the boy could bring the two sisters along. Li snapped at Jian, reminding him that the girl was reluctant to go, but insisted that Shin would keep her safe from any trouble. Lu pulled the bewildered girl into a tight embrace and instructed the sisters to follow him. He believed that spending just one night with him would be advantageous for them, promising a reward in return. Shin hesitated, reluctant to comply, but Lu reminded her of the safety of her daughter and husband. A smirk crossed Lu's face as he observed how easily the beauty set aside her principles to adhere to family obligations. Our main character observed the scene intently, concealed behind the staircase wall. He then called Jing, instructing them to cancel the Jian family's invitation and extend one solely to Xin. Meanwhile, outside the house, the sisters approached the gate just as Lu was about to leave. Suddenly, Qing appeared before him, commanding him to halt. Lu was puzzled by the girl's identity, but Qing quickly informed him that he couldn't take her to the celebration. The girl, with a serious demeanor, warned him to prepare for a tragic end. Lu, initially thinking the beauty before him was simply jealous and hoping for a ticket to the event, felt his spirits plummet when Qing revealed that his invitation had been disqualified. John observed the girl, intrigued by her mysterious presence. She always appeared just in time to save them. Lu, however, dismissed the notion that a family with a multi-billion-dollar fortune could be overlooked, convinced that the girl before him was merely an actress playing a role. Qing, weary of Lu's arrogance, sighed in frustration. Just then, Xin leaned in closer to Qing, reassuring her not to worry. But Lu had no plans to let the sisters go. He threatened to make Xin crawl on his knees before him, a sinister smirk playing on his lips. Jing could no longer hold back her fury and delivered a sharp slap across his face. He stumbled to the ground, rage boiling within him as he shouted that she would pay dearly for this offense. Without missing a beat, Jing threatened to cut out his tongue if he dared to speak again. Just then, the old grandfather emerged into the courtyard, his expression darkening as he realized that his family might miss the invitations. Lin's wife was taken aback when the old man directed his anger at her. She calmly responded that she had no control over the situation. Just as he was about to raise his voice, Qing's screams pierced the air. The girl insisted that Lu had no invitation and was therefore disqualified from attending the event. Furthermore, she revealed that, among the entire Jin family, only Jin had received an invitation to Ben Hai's celebration. The revelation took everyone by surprise, particularly elder grandfather, who was unfamiliar with the master Lin the girl had mentioned. Qing lowered his head to Xin and assured her that an exclusive invitation would be sent her way soon. Meanwhile, the old man remained skeptical. He simply couldn't fathom that exclusive invitations were handed out to people on the street. At that moment, a man approached the gate, claiming he had an invitation to deliver. The grandfather couldn't question the man's words, yet he was baffled by how Xin could possibly be invited. Lu, rising from the ground, recognized the man as Wang. Clearly surprised to see him here, Liu announced to everyone that this man was the organizer of the Ben Hai celebration and that he would now prove Xin's invitation. Wang glanced at the battered man and asked, "Who are you, and why are you behaving so rudely?" Lu pointed to himself, reminding Wang, "I am the heir of the Lu family." The organizer of the celebration interjected, recalling that the Lu family had been unable to attend this year. The elderly elder confirmed that it was indeed the organizer who had barred the Lu family from participating in the festivities. At that moment, Wang instructed his assistant to remove Li Yu, ensuring he wouldn't disturb the master any longer. With a sweet smile, he took the letter, his curiosity piqued about who Jin might be. Meanwhile, the protagonist's wife felt a wave of anxiety wash over her as she noticed the man searching for her. However, Wang bowed respectfully and presented an exclusive invitation from Mr. Lin, inviting her to the upcoming celebration. Jin accepted the invitation and inquired whether this Lin was the same person who had rented the hotel for her. The man confirmed that this wasn't the first time Lin had showered the lady with extravagant gifts. Jian pondered that if her sister married this master, their troubles would be over, so she eagerly asked if they could meet him. Meanwhile, the protagonist watched the unfolding scene from his bedroom window, shaking his head at his wife's younger sister's remarkably short memory. Wang soon explained to the girl that the Lord had many pressing matters to attend to and could not receive guests at the moment. Jin studied the blonde intently, reminding her not to meddle in her affairs. Jian sensed the weight of Xin's words and trembled with fear. After a moment of annoyance, she retorted that her sister would never let go of her husband. The organizer soon replied that his work was complete and bowed respectfully before Shin. Jin reminded him that his duties were finished and that he could leave. Suddenly, the old man approached his granddaughters, curious about the identity of the master who had attended Shin's birthday party. Cousin Yan quickly snatched the girl's note and, with a hint of irony, asked what method she had used to win over this intriguing figure. Yan was convinced that she alone deserved to attend the celebration. However, Shin was reluctant to give up her seat. She was eager to discover if this master was, in fact, her husband. Frustrated, their grandfather expressed his discontent, accusing Shin of prioritizing her husband and daughter over the family. He desperately wished for her to abandon the protagonist and instead focus on their path to wealth. The old man believed that Lin had become a burden to his family, so Shen agreed to withdraw the invitation, provided it didn't affect his family. Yan felt a sense of satisfaction, convinced that Yinzhen didn't deserve an invitation in the first place. Meanwhile, the protagonist and the king observed this unfolding scene, their expressions revealing a mix of intrigue and concern. Lin's servant yearned to return and teach them a lesson, but the hero intervened, forbidding her from acting on her impulse. He vowed that one day they would come to regret their very existence. Just then, King's phone rang. It was the school principal, delivering the alarming news that Rui had been rushed to the hospital. Lin's heart sank at the mention of her daughter losing consciousness. Without hesitation, she commanded Shin to start the car immediately. After a few minutes, they arrived at Benhai Central Hospital, carrying Rui, who was unconscious. The doctor meticulously examined the test results. Shin and Lin entered the room, anxious to know how she was doing. The doctor looked up and explained that he had ruled out other possibilities, confirming that Rui was experiencing a relapse of an old illness. Lin sat on the bed, her voice trembling as she asked if a bone marrow transplant could save her once more. The doctor paused, then suggested they first invite Dr. Lee to examine Roy. The protagonist was taken aback to learn that Dr. Lee was in town. The doctor explained that Lee had returned as soon as he caught wind of the master's awakening and was currently at the hospital. Lin quickly dispatched her servant to summon the doctor, insisting he arrive without delay. As the doctor made his way, he inquired whether Lin was aware of the severity of Rui's illness. Lin responded, her voice heavy with concern, that she had been preoccupied with her own injuries at the time and hadn't grasped the full extent of her daughter's condition. The doctor explained that 2 years prior, Rui had awakened both imperial and royal bloodlines simultaneously, which was the reason she had fallen into a coma. The protagonist was filled with fear and disbelief, but then Dr. Lee entered the room, offering reassurance. "You have nothing to worry about," he said. "I'm here to help the princess." The old man's joy at seeing Lin again was palpable. Tears welled up in his eyes. This emotional display left the men in the room feeling uneasy, exchanging silent glances as they processed the unexpected moment. The god of war shifted his focus back to the main conversation, his concern for his daughter's blood fusion weighing heavily on him. Typically, no royal and imperial bloodlines would coexist in a single individual. However, Dr. Lee revealed that in this day and age, only 3 people possessed both bloodlines. The protagonist was aware that he was one of them, and there was also another boy in the capital who shared this rare distinction. He couldn't shake the feeling of curiosity about the third person he had never heard of. Lee paused dramatically, then, with a burst of energy, revealed that the mysterious figure was none other than Rui. Suddenly, an unsettling aura enveloped the doctor, causing the protagonist to recoil in discomfort. He shouted Qing's name, urgency lacing his voice. The girl subtly shifted behind the old man for protection. Qing raised his hand near his neck, demanding the master clarify his intentions before making any move toward the girl. Lee revealed that Lin's royal bloodline had been personally forbidden years ago, a decree that shouldn't have impacted his daughter. He then posed a question to the god of war, asking if he was curious about the reason behind these events. Lin, uncertain about the origins of the imperial bloodline, permitted Qing to release the doctor. The old man assured them that as long as the girl remained by his side, no one would ever recognize her as a descendant of the imperial lineage. Lin had anticipated this moment and chose to trust Dr. Lee for the time being. Qing recalled that the school needed to inform Shin, who would be arriving soon. The protagonist recognized it was time to depart and assured Lee that he would handle the explanation to Yinsen. Just then, his wife rushed through the hospital corridors, her anxiety palpable as she sprinted past Sun without even noticing him. The guy was curious about why she was here, but his friend grew irritated, not wanting to stir up any trouble. Sun playfully tapped his friend's head, assuring him that this time he was innocent. He speculated that the girl was concerned about the child. Lu, puzzled by the need for this information, listened as Sun explained that Shin would undoubtedly require money for treatment. Lu was well aware of the dire circumstances surrounding Jian's family and was ready to seize the opportunity to make the blonde beg for his help. Just then, Yixin burst into the room, her face etched with worry as she inquired about her daughter's well-being. Li quickly urged her to lower her voice, hoping to avoid waking the little princess. Surprised to see a second doctor alongside Shin, Yixin couldn't help but ask, "Who are you?" Dr. Chen introduced his mentor, assuring everyone that Rui was safe. With a snap of his fingers, Rui began to turn over in his bed. Li remarked that the girl would soon awaken, thanks to acupuncture. Just then, Rui's eyes flew open as he searched the room for his father. Convinced he had heard her voice, the mother approached, sharing that she had fainted at school. Fortunately, she had crossed paths with a doctor who practiced traditional Chinese medicine. Rui immediately recognized him as a brilliant physician. Overwhelmed with emotion, the old man remarked on how kind the baby was to him. He leaned down and enveloped the girl in a warm embrace. Chin felt a knot of worry in her stomach, fearing she wouldn't be able to afford the doctor's appointment since her family refused to give her a dime. Sensing her distress, the doctor assured her that he wouldn't accept any payment from her. It was then that Rui, hearing the name Mr. Lin, realized he wasn't imagining things. He had truly heard his father's voice. With a mix of curiosity and urgency, Shin quickly asked the doctor if he could explain who Mr. Lin was and why he seemed to be helping her so often. Lai couldn't reveal the secret, so he simply stated that Lin was the supreme lord of the southern border, assuring her that the details would come to light when the time was right. Afterward, the doctor gently returned the girl to her bed and handed her mother a business card, instructing her to call if needed. With Rui now awake, the man felt reassured of her well-being, allowing him to say his goodbyes and leave the infirmary. The girl called her mother, confessing that Dr. Li had been invited by her father, and she had heard his voice while she slept. Although Shin usually dismissed her daughter's claims, she found herself agreeing this time. The prospect of the great Lord Lin truly being her husband intrigued her, especially since she had never met this mysterious man. Lin's personality, she thought, could explain so much. What truly troubled her about this theory was that the protagonist hadn't directly told her he had awakened. Rui could see that her mother was lost in thought, and those thoughts weighed heavily on her. Yet, the woman masked her concerns with a smile, winking at her daughter as she announced that they would be heading home. Just then, Dr. Chen stepped in, insisting that the little princess should remain under observation for a few more days. Shin felt a pang of worry at the thought of leaving Rui alone in the hospital. Yet her daughter, brimming with determination, reassured her mother that she could handle some time on her own. With that promise, Rui settled in, waiting patiently for her recovery. Meanwhile, Shin remained in the hospital, turning to a subordinate with a sense of urgency. "Have you found any information on the head of the Jin family?" she asked, her mind racing with the implications. King wasted no time and quickly uncovered something unusual. The girl reported that everyone in the family seemed ordinary, but Shin's father stood out. The protagonist remembered meeting his wife's father just once before he passed away shortly after. The subordinate confirmed this information, adding that she had come across rumors suggesting he was not the rightful heir. Lin's curiosity was piqued by this revelation. If it were true, it could cast doubt on the status of his wife's father. Li explained that, leveraging his position in society, he had uncovered that the emperor had light-haired heirs. This intriguing detail suggested that Shin's father might be a descendant of the emperor, but the truth remained elusive. The old man confessed his desire to take the princess as his disciple. Lin agreed, permitting him to teach her how to harness her abilities. Curious, he then asked Lin for permission to attend the Binhai celebration, eager to witness her return. Meanwhile, Shin faced a difficult decision, having to leave her daughter at the hospital. With a heavy heart, she urged the girl to listen to Dr. Chen. Shin promised Rui that she would definitely come after work. Her mother reassured her that everything would be fine before saying goodbye. Just then, Chen received a call from her cousin. The protagonist's wife was perplexed. What more could she want after already accepting the invitation? Yan insisted that the girl head to the company immediately. Half an hour later, Shin arrived at the office. As he neared the finance department, loud screams pierced the air. Inside, Yan was fuming, coffee cup in hand, as she berated the employees about their presence. Shin hesitated. He didn't want to confront his cousin, but he needed to uncover why they were searching for her. Suddenly, Yan turned to him, her expression a mix of surprise and irritation, as if she couldn't believe he was asking such obvious questions. Yan confronted Shin, accusing her of being a financial manager who had abandoned the company during a crisis. In a fit of frustration, she hurled her coffee at Shin, but the latter deftly dodged the splash. Shin recalled that she had requested the day off, but Yan dismissed her explanation outright. With a cold glare, Yan threatened to dock half a month's salary, vowing that next time she wouldn't miss her target. Shin attempted to defend herself, but her words fell on deaf ears. Yan was convinced that the company's troubles stemmed from people like her. The blonde hadn't realized that the weight of the crisis rested on her shoulders, as all decisions ultimately went through Yan. Her cousin recognized the gravity of the situation and issued a stern ultimatum. The company had 3 days to resolve the crisis, or Shin would be out of a job. The deadline felt impossibly tight, and Shin initially thought Yan was joking, but the seriousness in her cousin's tone quickly dispelled that notion. Yan reiterated her threat, making it clear that failure would result in Shin's dismissal. Yan felt a sense of satisfaction, convinced that Shin would never confront the situation. Meanwhile, Sun sat in the office, expressing his own impatience. "Like Wu Yu, I'm tired of waiting," he said, though he added, "But Yan assured us that there wouldn't be any issues with Shin this time." Lu, on the other hand, was growing increasingly anxious, eager to discover how he could gain the upper hand over Yan. Sun smiled with confidence, convinced that this time they would succeed. However, his friend couldn't shake off the tension, recalling that this wasn't their first attempt. Sensing the unease, Sun reassured him that he had a plan B ready. But when Sun questioned Yan's words, it sparked worry in her cousin. She quickly replied, "I won't tell anyone anything." Yan winked, leaving the men to ponder the unfairness of the Jian family's genetics. Lu turned to his friend, eager to know his plan, wanting to be ready for whatever might come next. Sun chimed in, noting that in Shin's life, 2 people held great significance: her young daughter Rei and her husband Lin. Meanwhile, the protagonist approached his daughter's room, asking if she would be willing to become a disciple of Dr. Li. Rei turned to the man, her eyes filled with hope, and asked if he would teach her the art of healing. The god of war gazed at his daughter with deep affection, eager to share what Li would impart. However, before he could respond, Xing appeared behind him, urgency in her voice as she reported the troubles plaguing Shin and the company. The Jian family was planning to seize their house to cover the losses. Lin, sensing the gravity of the situation, inquired if anyone was orchestrating these events from the shadows. The subordinate reported that several witnesses had spotted Liu and Sun in the finance department. Rei felt a wave of anxiety for her mother, but her father reassured her, promising to handle the situation himself so that she could focus on her recovery. Meanwhile, Qing awaited her master's instructions, inquiring if she should bring the 2 individuals to him. The protagonist decided they would confront Liu and Sun when the time was right. For now, their priority was to address the situation with Shin. Meanwhile, the wife of the god of war sat in her office, her mind racing as she struggled to find a way out of her dire situation. All the partners had pulled their investments, and even the bank had turned her down. Anxiety gnawed at her. She had only 1 day left to resolve the crisis. Just as her thoughts spiraled deeper into despair, the sound of the door creaking open broke her concentration. Someone had entered Shin's office without so much as a knock. This was Sun, and he was executing his plan by approaching the girl during a particularly challenging moment in her life. He maintained a relaxed demeanor, claiming he had come to offer her noble assistance. Shin rose from the table, determined to reject Sun's help. Firmly, she asked him to leave. Sun, undeterred, pressed on, reminding her that her family was homeless, but even that failed to sway her resolve. The young man declared that he always lends a hand to others, but then turned and said he wouldn't trouble her any further as he made his way to the exit. Just before leaving, he added that if she needed his assistance, she should meet him at the hotel by 9 in the morning. Anger flared within Shin at his audacity, and she shouted that she would never strike a deal with someone so unscrupulous. The boy didn't argue. He simply replied that he would be waiting for her at the designated place tomorrow. The protagonist's wife realized that her cousin and son had orchestrated the situation. Meanwhile, Shin's mother sifted through a stack of papers, her brow furrowed in confusion. She inquired why company documents had been sent to their home. With no other option, the daughter reluctantly explained that Yan intended to confiscate their house. The woman was seething with anger at the news, feeling as though troubles were perpetually raining down on her family. She believed her daughter would turn to a man named Lin for help, and that thought brought her some comfort. However, the protagonist's wife interjected, saying she had never even met this man. Frustrated, Li began to place the blame for the family's troubles squarely on her daughter's shoulders. Shin was determined not to let her loved ones down. With the Wang family remaining silent in response to her letter, she had no choice but to seek Sun's assistance. As the day of their meeting arrived, the clock ticked closer to the scheduled time. Shin entered the hotel and found the correct room. Bursting through the door, she called out to Sun, only to realize that the man by the window was not him. The girl stared at her feet, oblivious to her surroundings. Suddenly, Wang stepped away from the window and greeted her with a warm smile. Watching from a distance, Shin's suspicions flared. He believed Wang was colluding with the Sun family to bring down their company. Wang approached the blonde, his demeanor calm as he clarified the situation. "It's a misunderstanding," he said, his voice steady. "I simply don't have the time right now." With that, he handed her a check, hoping to ease the tension. Wang assured her that Mr. Lin would handle everything, even managing to change the Sun card number with a clever trick. That was why he was the one in the room with her. Shin felt a wave of relief and gratitude for the person who had come to her aid in such a dire situation. After leaving her side, Wang's demeanor shifted. He became serious as he met with the protagonist, reporting that his wife's issue had been resolved. Lin was ready to deliver punishment to the offender. Meanwhile, in another room, Lu simmered with anger, frustrated that Ixin had yet to come to him. He begrudgingly acknowledged that the girl was proving to be quite resilient. Just then, his phone rang. It was Yan, appearing on the screen with a confident smirk, boasting that he could kidnap anyone. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the room, and Lu dashed to the door, hoping it was Shin. However, as he opened the door, he was met with a girl who was nothing like he had expected. Ching stood there, her expression fierce, and without hesitation, she delivered a powerful kick to the man's face. Lu was sent sprawling backward, crashing into a table and sending dishes clattering to the floor. The force of her blow split his lip, leaving him stunned, confused, and bewildered. Lu couldn't comprehend why this strange girl seemed to constantly invade his space. Ching remained silent, his gaze fixed on the man, who looked strikingly familiar. The protagonist introduced himself as a soldier with years of service, now known as the supreme leader of the South. Lu felt a tremor of fear coursing through him as he questioned why this man was aiding Shin. Lin, sensing the tension, stepped forward and declared, "She's my wife," before forcefully pushing the man to the ground. Lu couldn't fathom how a disabled person could rise to lead the South, but in that moment, the protagonist radiated a formidable aura and declared that he didn't care whether Lu believed him or not. With a swift motion, the man leaned in, seized Lu by the collar of his t-shirt, and lifted him off the ground. Lin, witnessing the scene, felt a surge of determination. It was time for Liu to pay for this humiliation. Lu, however, remained convinced that the protagonist wouldn't dare take action against him. After all, he was one of the wealthiest heirs around. The man was mistaken, and he crashed into the wall with tremendous force. Injured and shaken, he no longer doubted the protagonist's strength. Desperately, he began to plead for forgiveness, promising to pay any amount of money. Lin regarded him coolly and asked, "Do I really look like someone who would be swayed by your pleas?" Meanwhile, Ching watched with a satisfied smile, relishing the moment, as his master made the man face the consequences of his actions. Lu's arm was broken, and pain radiated through the rest of his body. Yet the protagonist paused, delivering a chilling warning. Lin wanted the beaten man to grasp that next time there would be no mercy. As he turned to leave, he reminded Liu to keep his identity a secret. Moments later, as they strolled down the hotel corridor, Ching glanced at Lin and asked, "Are you worried about what might happen next?" The protagonist had vowed that if Lu's family dared to make a move, they would face ruthless annihilation. Just then, the girl's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. Ching's heart raced as Dr. Chen delivered the shocking news. The little princess had been kidnapped, and her whereabouts were unknown. Lin, equally shaken, felt the weight of the situation. They hurried to the hospital, determined to shield Jin from the devastating news. They arrived at the infirmary in record time. Dr. Chen was already there, and the god of war demanded to know when his daughter had vanished. Chen explained that he had brought her breakfast and had gone to prepare for physical therapy, but when he returned, Rui was nowhere to be found. The protagonist felt a deep sense of self-loathing for failing to prevent his daughter's kidnapping. Anger surged through him, and with a single blow, he shattered the infirmary floor. Chen collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed with guilt, as he confessed that it was all his fault and that he should have taken better care of the little princess. However, the protagonist reassured him, saying he didn't blame Chen for the kidnapping, understanding that the doctor had been preoccupied with his duties. These words left Chen feeling utterly lost. Lin instructed Ching to head straight to the checkpoint and locate the kidnapper. Meanwhile, a guard sat in a small room, engrossed in a game, convinced that victory was within his grasp. Just then, Ching appeared behind him, seizing the opportunity to distract him. She quickly reported the patient's disappearance and requested access to the camera footage. The man insisted on more detailed information about the missing person. Ching explained that the patient was a child who had disappeared just an hour ago. Irritated, the guards snapped at Ching, stating that only an hour had elapsed and that they needed to search the hospital first. Meanwhile, the man remained engrossed in his mobile phone, casually informing the guard that he wouldn't initiate the search until a full day had passed. Suddenly, a beam of light snatched the phone from the guard's hands, startling the adult man. Lin had no intention of wasting time. He was determined to do whatever it took. The security guard, now furious, shouted that he couldn't provide any records and that the area was off limits to outsiders. The protagonist unleashed a terrifying aura, causing Ching to realize that chaos was imminent. In a rush, she moved to intervene, presenting a coupon that identified them as members of the imperial family. The guard stood speechless, staring at the card that symbolized supreme power and authority. With urgency in her voice, Ching insisted they expedite the delivery of the recording. She noticed Lin starting to calm down as the guard hurried to the computer. He quickly searched through the records from the last hour and finally found a moment when they could clearly see Ray sleeping in his room. The protagonist leaned in closer, asking to enlarge the lower panel. The footage revealed a man in a white coat lifting the girl from her bed and carrying her away in an unknown direction. The guard squinted at the silhouette of the kidnapper, a sense of familiarity washing over him. Lin caught wind of this and reported, "He resembles a hospital intern named Zhao Gang." Ching, however, noted that he had yet to encounter this individual. The guard explained, "Zhao isn't well known around the institution. He only got in through connections." He mentioned that 2 days ago, Zhao approached him to inquire about the hospital surveillance. This unexpected development complicated matters further. Lin felt his grip on the situation slipping once more. He gave Ching just 5 minutes to locate Zhao Gang. The girl didn't mention the deadline. Instead, she vanished from the office to fulfill her orders. The guard, sensing the oppressive atmosphere, began to worry that he had made a mistake. Lin's dark mood loomed heavily, palpable even from a distance, prompting the guard to think it best not to interfere. Meanwhile, the protagonist sat in his chair, pondering whether the members of the imperial family were always so fearful. Ching quickly completed her task, and within minutes, Zhao was brought into the office. She tossed him at Lin's feet and reported that her team had caught him sneaking through the hospital. The inmate shot back, insisting he was a doctor, which was precisely why he was in the hospital. Lin, unfazed, demanded to know where the boy had taken the child. Zhao feigned confusion, claiming he didn't understand what child they were referring to. The protagonist's patience wore thin, and soon his foot pressed down hard on the kidnapper's shoulder, causing the ground to crack beneath him. Lin applied relentless pressure until Zhao's right hand was pinned firmly to the earth. Ching and the guard observed the interrogation, their expressions tense as they witnessed Lin's brutal methods. The kidnapper, overwhelmed by the torment, finally broke and revealed that he had been hired for the job. The god of war felt a surge of satisfaction at those words. Finally, he had a reason to abandon his self-restraint. Lin rose from his seat and struck Zhao with a powerful blow. At first glance, it seemed almost casual, but the impact left Zhao reeling, blood spilling from his lips. Before Zhao could regain his composure, Lin pressed his foot firmly against his chest, refusing to give him a moment's respite. Lin pinned the kidnapper to the ground with his leg, asserting control over the situation. Seizing the opportunity, Zhao feigned unconsciousness, hoping to escape scrutiny. However, Ching saw right through his ruse and urged Lin to let her interrogate him. But Lin shook his head, determined not to waste time on such antics. The young doctor understood that he had only one chance to survive. With urgency, he promised to reveal everything, starting with where he had taken Rui. Zhao struggled to speak, but managed to say that he had placed the girl in Sun's car and taken her to his house. Lin wasn't particularly surprised by the name, but now he was certain that Sun would meet his end. Zhao continued, explaining that Sun had coerced him into entering the hospital to kidnap the girl. He requested to be released, but Lin was convinced that the man had made a grave mistake. Simply letting him go wouldn't suffice. Afterward, the protagonist instructed Ching to take care of the kidnapper's body and then follow him to Sun's house. Meanwhile, Sun's property lay in eerie silence. Rui was bound to a chair, shouting for her uncle to set her free. She insisted that the police would surely apprehend him. Sun laughed, dismissing the idea that anyone would dare break into the home of an influential family without evidence. He was a despicable man, shifting the blame onto Shin for his own actions. In his twisted mind, he believed he had to repay the girl for the damage he claimed she had caused to her health. As he cruelly tugged at her cheeks, she protested, insisting that her mother had never done anything wrong. Meanwhile, Rui continued to resist, convinced that his father would soon arrive to rescue her. The sun beat down on the girl's forehead as she dared to mention Lin in front of him. "This garbage is the source of my suffering," he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. Rui's cries filled the air, echoing her anguish, when suddenly the sound of shattering glass pierced through the tension. The protagonist emerged from the shadows, fury in his eyes, and landed a powerful punch squarely on Sun's face. The impact sent Sun crashing into the wall, leaving him sprawled on the ground. The moment the girl spotted her father, her tears ceased instantly. Rui's heart swelled with relief at the sight of Lin, and he hurried to untie her from the chair, reassuring her that everything would be all right. With a trembling voice, she told him she had been waiting for him. As he carefully examined her for injuries, she revealed that the bad uncle had struck her on the forehead. But the instant her father arrived, the pain seemed to vanish. Lin scooped up Rui and asked if she was ready to teach the bandit a lesson. The little girl nodded eagerly, affirming her readiness. Sun trembled as Rui recounted to her father how she couldn't remember which hand her uncle had struck her with, but she vividly recalled the pain it caused. Seizing the opportunity, Sun decided to make a break for it, his mind racing with questions about how Lin had found him so quickly. The god of war listened intently to his princess's tale, drawing his own conclusions from her words. Sun was nearing the exit, convinced that he would be safe the moment he burst onto the street. After all, he thought, Lin wouldn't dare strike him in front of everyone. However, he underestimated Lin's reputation as the god of war. With a speed that left onlookers in awe, Lin closed the distance in an instant. Sun's escape attempt crumbled, and now he would have to face the consequences of his actions. Lin stared at the kidnapper, fear gripping her voice as she insisted she didn't remember letting him out. With each passing second, Sun began to grasp the severity of his situation, a wave of horror washing over him. Determined to fight back, he focused on the hand that held his daughter. In a burst of adrenaline, Sun sprinted away, calling out for help, desperately hoping his parents would come to his rescue. Naturally, he didn't. Lin had a firm grip on the man's hand, preventing any escape. With a swift motion, he twisted Sun's arm, eliciting a sharp scream of pain. Ray covered his ears and complained to his father about the man's incessant noise. The protagonist assured him that the bad uncle would soon be silent. In that moment, a blue flame flickered to life in his left hand. The flames surged towards Sun, and he let out a piercing scream, prompting the girl to instinctively shut her eyes. Sun's expression darkened, and instead of screams, only faint, almost inaudible squeaks escaped his lips as he collapsed to the ground. In that moment, Line heard the anguished cry of the family head. The man burst into the room, pleading for his son's life. His gaze fell upon Sun's condition, and a wave of shock washed over him as he grasped the gravity of the situation. His chest was scorched, and his body bore the marks of countless bruises. His eyes were glazed over. In desperation, his father fell to his knees before the god of war, pleading for mercy and forgiveness for Sun's foolish mistake. Yet, the protagonist remained unmoved by his father's words. He felt no sympathy for his daughter. The head of the family understood all too well that they were at a disadvantage. Suddenly, screams echoed through the room. Ching reassured everyone that everything was fine in the hospital. Ray, startled by the sudden commotion, looked frightened. However, his father quickly explained that this aunt was a friend, and there was no reason to be afraid of her. With that, Lin handed Ray over to Ching, determined to confront the evil uncles alone. Meanwhile, Sun's father struggled to contain his fear. Ray grasped Ching's shoulders, wishing for his father's success and taking revenge on Sun. As Ray exited the room, the protagonist felt a surge of power welling up within him. Ely recalled the time when he had shown kindness, but now the head of the family was determined to seize the god of war, reminding the man that he had no right to impose conditions. Meanwhile, Sun desperately attempted to crawl backward, fear evident in his every movement. This time, his pleas fell on deaf ears as Lin dispatched the man with a single, decisive blow. The father could only watch helplessly as his son fell, despair etched across his face. Lin's voice cut through the silence, chillingly declaring that it was too late for mercy and that he offered no second chances. With a swift surge of speed, he closed the distance to San's father, who remained frozen in shock. Gripping the man's head firmly, Lin delivered a grim warning. It would be best for his family to leave town within a day, or they would face the same fate. The father realized that if he wanted to avoid the next world, he had no choice but to side with Lin and leave the city. After everything that had transpired on Lee's property, he burst into the room, seething with anger, eager to discover who had dared to strike his son. He vowed to tear the culprit apart. Lee considered complaining to his father, as he often did, but then hesitated. He remembered all too well that revealing Lin's identity would spell his doom. For the sake of the family's well-being, the man fell silent, his spirit dulled by apathy. He confessed that he was at a loss for words. In a fit of anger, the head of the family struck his son hard across the face, insisting that Li should never forget their dominance over the city. Li pondered whether the Jian family wielded more power than he had anticipated, deciding it was best to keep Lin's identity under wraps. The father regarded his son as weak, dismissing his story as unnecessary since he had already hired an investigator. Just then, a man approached them, breathless with urgency, and revealed that he had uncovered a link between the culprit and the Jian family. The father was poised to annihilate the entire Jian family in one fell swoop. He noticed the investigator lingering and assumed he had more news to share. His instincts proved correct. The man revealed the shocking details of his son's murder, adding that the killer was the same individual who had assaulted Li. A chill ran through Li's body as dread settled in. He feared he might be next. His father viewed his son's family as a failure for their inability to confront the Jian family. Consumed by a thirst for revenge, he devised a plan to deal with the Jians on the night of Benhai's celebration. As the day approached, it was finally time for Shin to pick up his daughter from the hospital. The protagonist's wife entered the room carrying a cake and asked how Rui was feeling. To her horror, she discovered that her daughter was not in the infirmary. Desperately, the woman called out for her, but silence greeted her, an unsettling void that filled her with dread. The cake slipped from her trembling hands, crashing to the floor. Just when despair threatened to consume her, she heard her daughter's voice. In an instant, all her fears faded away as she rushed to the girl, frantic with concern. Rui, wanting to spare her mother any worry, lied, saying that her father had taken her. Shin, however, cautioned her daughter not to play with strangers. The woman felt a surge of anxiety when her daughter mentioned that Lin was taking her out to play. This was unsettling for Shin, who had believed her husband was home all this time. As she watched the cake being revealed, her heart ached. She realized that Lin's wife prioritized her daughter's well-being above all else. Nearby, Lin spoke with a heavy heart, admitting that Shin truly was a wonderful mother. The protagonist was visibly distressed, expressing how much he owed her. Just then, Lin interjected, reminding everyone that it was time to prepare for the Benhai banquet. As the protagonist reflected on his last battle, he resolved to fight with every ounce of strength he had left for the peace of his family. Meanwhile, a man lounged by the pool, sipping wine with an air of calm indifference. He turned to his subordinate and inquired if the rumors were true. Had the great Lin truly awakened? The server confirmed the whispers, adding that one of the families had already been expelled by him. The Lord of the Dragons dismissed it as mere theatrics meant to showcase Lin's significance. Yet deep down, he knew his own family was losing its grip on power. The subordinate, however, was convinced that Lin posed a genuine threat to the Emperor and suggested they eliminate him before he could rise further. The man's anger flared as he glared at the servant, his focus unwavering even as he remained in the pool. With a surge of energy, he sent the servant sprawling backward. "I don't recall giving such an order," the Dragon Lord declared, his voice cold and commanding. The servant, struggling to regain his footing, insisted, "Your Majesty, it's dangerous to leave the God of War alive." But the Dragon Lord remained unfazed. "Lin could prove useful," he replied, his tone firm. "His reputation among the people holds value." However, he believed that Lin should be displayed somewhere. Upon hearing the Dragon Lord's words, the subordinate vowed to handle everything. The Dragon Lord then stepped to the center of the pool and reached for the spear with his inhuman hand. Yet, the spear resisted, crackling with red lightning along its entire length. The Dragon Lord was compelled to release it, for it had rejected him. The lightning bolt from the spear struck the man's hand, inflicting a severe wound. Suddenly, he declared that Lin was still alive and needed to be visited. At that moment, eyes emerged on the man's unusual hand, and a concentrated power began to gather in his palm. The Emperor, realizing he could not wield the artifact, resolved to destroy it instead. The lightning from the divine spear illuminated the surroundings, accompanied by the man's maniacal laughter. Meanwhile, in Lin's house, the family went about their evening enjoying a peaceful night together. Suddenly, Lin sensed something was amiss and was taken aback to discover that the Thunder God's spear had been destroyed. Xing, noticing the drastic change in Lin's expression, inquired about what had happened. Lin asked about the spear, and Xing explained that after the border war, he had heard it was taken by the royal family. However, he added, the Lai Shan spear only recognizes its true owner, so it would never be wielded by anyone else. The protagonist explained that the spear had been destroyed just moments ago. The girl, incredulous, remarked that the Lai Shan spear was a divine weapon, leaving her baffled as to how it could be so easily shattered. He responded that it served as a warning to him. Moreover, he knew who was responsible for its destruction, and that person would certainly not miss Benhai's celebration. With determination, Lin settled into his wheelchair and assured the king that he would reclaim everything that had been taken from him. At that moment, a man clad entirely in black emerged near Lin's house, swiftly approaching the windows. He spotted Lin's room and hurled a blade toward it. The glass shattered beside her, and something whizzed past Lin at breakneck speed. Ching's heart raced as he realized the hitman had come for them. Fortunately, Lin instinctively ducked, and as the blade clattered to the floor, she picked it up, miraculously unharmed. The subordinate shouted to the main character that she was heading straight for the assassin. Lin examined the dragon god dagger in her hands with careful scrutiny. Meanwhile, Jiang and his mother sat in the living room, puzzled by the strange noises echoing around them. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The girl glanced around, her heart racing with fear. Lin's heart raced with terror as she realized there was more than one killer in the house. Jiang let out a piercing scream when she spotted a shadowy figure looming in the darkness before her. Desperate for answers, she demanded to know who he was, but the masked man remained silent, his gaze fixed intently on the girls. With a chilling tone, he warned them that they would pay with their lives for protecting the wrong person. A small purple orb began to materialize in the criminal's hand as he readied himself to strike the girls. Li, unwilling to abandon their base without cause, quickly offered to hand over all the money they had. The masked boy taunted the woman, suggesting she could take her money to the grave. Jiang wrapped his arms around his mother, who trembled with fear. Several agonizing seconds ticked by until the girls noticed a man gripping the criminal's hand, halting his attack. Lin condemned the man's actions, twisting his arm just enough to assert her dominance. The protagonist couldn't fathom why he would target defenseless girls. Despite her reservations about the Jiang family, Lin was determined to protect them. Suddenly, a crackling blue lightning surged in her hand. The criminal, still with one free hand, gathered his power into a fist. In a tense moment, both combatants launched their attacks simultaneously, each landing a blow on the other. The mercenary chuckled, readying himself for another strike, convinced that Lin was weak. Their battle raged on, and soon a knife glinted in the boy's hand, hidden beneath his mask. Just then, the door swung open, and the bandit taunted Lin, asking if those entering were his family. In an instant, Lin sprang into action. When Jin and his daughter stepped into the house, they found it eerily empty, with no one else in sight. Jin stepped inside, immediately sensing the fear that gripped the girls. Jiang looked up, her voice trembling as she asked if her sister had returned. Surprised to find them huddled in the dark, Jin moved to the switch and flicked it on. As the room illuminated, her heart sank at the sight of the chaos left in the wake of the battle. Horrified, she gasped, "What happened here?" While their mother struggled to regain her composure, Jiang spoke up, her voice shaky but determined. "We were attacked by a man, but someone managed to save us." Jiang mentioned that Mr. Lin had shown up on Oxen's birthday. Ray burst into the house, shouting that his father had saved the family. Grandmother looked on in disgust, viewing the protagonist as nothing more than trash. Meanwhile, the hero had dealt with the criminal and returned to examine the golden dagger. Just then, Jing appeared at the window, her expression regretful as she reported that she had failed the task and that the bandit had managed to escape. Lin dismissed the matter as unimportant for the moment and directed her attention to the dagger in her hands. The subordinate immediately recognized it as the very dagger awarded to her by the Dragon Lord. She then mentioned that Bin Hai's celebration had been moved to the evening, confirming Lin's suspicions. Lin instructed Jing to go to Wang and insist that he fetch Oxen for his safety. The protagonist realized they were plotting something against him during Bin Hai's celebration. With a final farewell, Jing departed, leaving the weight of the situation hanging in the air. Suddenly, the bedroom door burst open, and the joyful daughter rushed toward the hero. She believed wholeheartedly that her father had saved both her aunt and grandmother, and he praised her for her cleverness. Lin scooped the girl into his arms and playfully asked how she would feel if her father wasn't quite the hero she imagined. With a bright smile, Rui looked up at him and declared that as long as he continued to protect her and her mother, he would always be her hero. At that moment, Axon entered the room and gently asked his daughter not to disturb her father. She scooped Rui into her arms and agreed that they would let him rest a little longer. Axon desperately wished for Lin to wake up. Suddenly, the sound of a ringing cell phone broke the silence, and she answered it. Lin's wife heard Wang's voice on the other end. He explained that the celebration had been moved up and that someone would be there to pick her up tomorrow. However, she hesitated, mentioning that she no longer had an invitation. Wang quickly reassured her, saying that the invitation was merely a piece of cardboard and that she was a respected guest. Relieved, she expressed her happiness at the news and apologized for any inconvenience caused. Axon gently stroked Rui's head and asked her to take care of Daddy tomorrow night. Rui beamed at the thought of spending time with her father, confidently declaring that she feared nothing as long as he was by her side. Finally, the night of Binhai's celebration arrived, transforming the vast grounds into a dazzling spectacle. Yet, amidst the festivities, Lin couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She noticed Axon's troubled expression, puzzling over why he seemed so upset during such an important event. Axon was deeply concerned about her family, especially after their home had been attacked. However, her mother brusquely dismissed her worries, insisting that her two sons were worthless and that Axon needed to focus on finding a husband instead. Just then, they turned their heads, and Jin spotted their grandfather with Yan. Zhang held his mother tightly, voicing his frustration over his cousin's behavior. Yan spotted her relatives and questioned how they had arrived without an invitation. Zhang proudly declared that they were honored guests of Lord Wang, who had personally brought them to the celebration. The man beside Yuan was taken aback by Zhang's beauty, while Yan attempted to present herself in a more favorable light. Amused, the girl revealed that she actually had an invitation and began to suggest that Zhang should go home. Lin's sister-in-law gestured toward Yan, reminding her that the invitation was meant for her sister and needed to be returned. Yan, however, countered that only a worthy representative deserved such an invitation. Meanwhile, the neighbor finally caught sight of the invitation and nearly choked when he recognized its purple and gold hues. Those colors were the emblem of the imperial family, and this invitation confirmed the whispers that the Zhan family had forged a close connection with the Wang family. Suddenly, another man appeared beside Yan and snatched the invitation, declaring it a fake. The girl attempted to reclaim it, but her efforts were in vain. The man observed that her joy had quickly faded. Yan felt a surge of annoyance at this stranger dismissing the genuine invitation as counterfeit. The old man, sensing the tension, ordered the girl to mind her words and introduced the esteemed gentleman as Joe. Yan's anxiety surged as she realized an influential figure was now beside her. A member of his family was questioning why the Jian family, whom they deemed beneath them, was present at such a lavish celebration. But after hearing those words, her anxiety dissipated, replaced by a familiar irritation and anger. Just then, her grandfather intervened. The old man bowed respectfully, apologizing for his rudeness, and assured everyone that the family was indeed welcome. The man smiled upon hearing the words from the head of the Jian family. However, Zhou swiftly rejected the invitation, accusing the Jian family members of beating Liu. He declared that he wanted to express his sorrow, but now he was contemplating taking action regarding Liu's situation. Yan, confused by Zhou's outburst, interjected, clarifying that they hadn't done anything to Liu at all. The girl shot a quick glance at Jan, suspecting her involvement. Just then, Yan seized Yixin's hand, accusing her of harming Liu in an attempt to win him over. Zhan interjected, insisting that it couldn't have been Yixin, as she was unaware of the beating. Liu's father, however, dismissed the girl's defense, commanding her to stop pretending and reveal the truth. Otherwise, the Jian family would be forced to leave the city by tomorrow. Just as the tension escalated, Wang appeared, flanked by the protagonist, his daughter, and the king. Wang would not stand for family disputes in his place. Rui spotted her mother and called out to her, joyfully waving her father's hand. "Dad has a surprise for you, Mom," she exclaimed, her excitement lighting up the atmosphere. Zhou regarded the newcomers with a sneer and inquired about their identities. Lu's father explained that the man in the wheelchair was Lin Feng, Yixin's husband, and the girl beside him was their daughter. Zhou erupted into laughter, tears streaming down his face as he mocked their presence. Unable to comprehend why such a loser had come, his laughter was abruptly cut short by Lin's voice. The protagonist then asked, "What can you still do?" Jin gazed at her husband, disbelief washing over her as she realized he was truly awake. Rui stood beside her mother, ready to present the evidence that would prove her right. Zhou, however, dismissed the idea of waking Lin, insisting it was pointless since he was in a wheelchair. The protagonist merely scoffed at this remark, rising to his feet and emanating a chilling aura. Zhou was taken aback by the sight before him, and it didn't take long for him to declare that he would break Lin's legs for what he had done to Liu. To everyone's astonishment, the protagonist stood up. His wife, unable to contain her emotions, let tears stream down her face. Lin tried to comfort her, assuring her that everything would be all right now. But then, without warning, Yan began to strike him, demanding to know how Lin had the audacity to wake up so suddenly. The hero abruptly pushed her aside, leaving Qing to handle the escalating situation. Following orders, the subordinate delivered a sharp slap to Yan's face. Despite the blow, Shin's cousin continued to believe she had the right to threaten both Lin and Qing. Seizing the moment, Zhou joined in, hurling insults at the main character, calling him a cripple. He sneered, claiming that even with his newfound clarity, Lin was still nothing more than worthless trash. Lu's father shares the same sentiment. Unfazed, the protagonist calmly states that in just 5 minutes, the Lu family will cease to exist in Baihai City. Xing, eager to act, declares he will make it happen immediately. Zhou and the head of the Lu family erupt into laughter, unable to fathom that Lin possesses the power to bring down their empire. However, their amusement is abruptly cut short when the old man receives a call, delivering shocking news. The company has suddenly collapsed, and all the investors are scrambling to withdraw their funds. To make matters worse, the banks refuse to extend any loans. Now, the company is drowning in billions of dollars in debt and on the brink of bankruptcy. Lu's father sat in stunned silence, grappling with the gravity of the situation. Joe couldn't shake his worry. His family's finances were also tied up in this failing company. With no other options left, the old man found himself on his knees, begging for forgiveness at Lin's feet, only to be met with a cold, disdainful glance. Joe stood his ground, convinced that the main character was insignificant, and refused to bow his head. He felt secure in his ability to take down Lin whenever he chose. However, as the protagonist exuded a menacing aura, a smile playing on his lips, he asked if Joe was ready. In that instant, a wave of regret washed over Joe for his earlier words. He quickly backtracked, insisting that Lin couldn't lay a finger on an emissary sent by the royal family to the Binhai banquet. He boldly displays the royal family badge, claiming he's there because Supreme Lin didn't recover in time to attend the banquet. The man had returned to the capital for his own recovery, but the crowd was skeptical of his story. Joe, however, assured them he wouldn't spread false information. Suddenly, Lin snatched the emblem from his hand, causing the man to tremble in fear. "How dare you steal from the royal family?" he exclaimed, his voice quaking with indignation. Suddenly, the hero shatters the badge with a burst of blue light, declaring that the rumors of Supreme Lin returning to the capital for recovery are false. For the people of this place, breaking the emblem is tantamount to insulting the royal family. Yan turns to his grandfather, urgency in his voice. "We need to make it clear that we have no connection to this mad cripple. If we don't, the Jin family could be in serious trouble." Rui steps into the fray, anger flaring as he hears the insults directed at his father. Lin is no coward like the Jin family, he asserts, and she can handle her own problems. Just then, Yan lunges at the little girl, ready to silence her with a shout, but Lin intervenes, swiftly pulling the woman away from her daughter with a surge of power. "Remember, Yan," she warns, her voice steady, "you cannot insult the supreme daughter." Jin's cousin crumples to the ground after yet another slap, her voice ringing out as she insists that the protagonist is nothing but trash. But then, a realization dawns on her. He had referred to himself as Supreme Lin. Joe, intrigued, wonders aloud if Lin truly is the supreme of the Southern Territory. Just then, Xing returns to his master, presenting him with an army uniform. In a matter of seconds, the main character dons the outfit, confidently declaring that he is indeed the supreme of the Southern Territory. "But you can also call me Lin Feng," he adds with a smirk. Jin's eyes widen in surprise as she asks if her husband was truly the man who had been helping her all along. With a warm smile, the protagonist confirms her suspicions. Yan, still in disbelief, grapples with the reality that he has lost such a formidable ally to his own cousin. The onlookers are equally astonished, never imagining they would encounter someone of such supreme caliber. Amidst the chaos, old Li steps in, shaking his head in frustration and muttering curses at everyone for failing to notice the metal gleaming on Lin's uniform. The guests are taken aback by the unexpected arrival of the royal family's doctor. Li kneels before the protagonist, pledging to follow him for the rest of his life. Lin, however, assures the doctor that such formality isn't necessary. Meanwhile, Zhou remains in disbelief, voicing his skepticism that Lin Feng and Supreme Lin could possibly be the same person. For him, the protagonist has just paid someone to put on a show. Dr. Li, unable to tolerate such insolence, delivers a swift punch to Zhou's stomach. Zhou crumples to the ground, clutching his belly, and protests that an old man shouldn't assault a young man. He attempts to threaten the doctor, claiming that influential people in his family will not let this go unpunished. With a steely gaze, Li asserts that he holds the power to ensure the downfall of those so-called superiors, but only after Zhou is dealt with. In an instant, the man is sent sprawling to the ground with a punch to the face. Li turns to the supreme leader, seeking direction. Just moments ago, the protagonist had instructed Wang to expel the Zhou family, the Lu family, and the Jian family. After all, they were uninvited guests. The banquet would officially commence only after their removal. Yan and his grandfather come to the unsettling realization that they are about to be expelled. In a sudden outburst, the girl insists that Shin should face expulsion as well, pointing out her ties to the Jian family. As the old man speaks with his granddaughter, Jiang has a moment of clarity. He recognizes that his brother-in-law is none other than the formidable Supreme Lin. Meanwhile, his mother feels a wave of shame wash over her for the way she has treated him all this time. Meanwhile, the nobles raise their glasses in a toast, celebrating the return of the Supreme. At last, they could witness the hero in person. In stark contrast, the Jian family found themselves unceremoniously expelled from the banquet venue. Yan grumbled incessantly while his grandfather calmly explained that it was only natural, given Lin's illustrious reputation as a general before her unfortunate circumstances. The girl is convinced that the protagonist is merely pretending to be the Supreme. Determined, she vows to seduce Lin, convinced that Shin is unworthy of marrying him. Meanwhile, in the capital, the young emperor, known as the Lord of Dragons, receives troubling news. Zhou has been defeated by Qin, and Lin has not only expelled him from the banquet, but has also destroyed the emblem of the royal family. The emperor's eyes blazed with fury as he believed Qin was cutting all ties with the royal family to ally with Lin. He commanded his subordinate to address the situation at once. The trembling servant stammered, barely able to voice that he couldn't even approach them. In a fit of rage, the Lord of Dragons unleashed a beam of purple light, ensnaring the terrified servant in its grasp. His voice boomed as he proclaimed that the Zhou family must be permitted to annihilate the Jian family, and they were authorized to employ the most powerful weapon against Lin if necessary. The servant, trembling and barely able to breathe, nodded in agreement to carry out the order. The emperor sneered, remarking that he might have shown mercy to something so useless had it remained crippled, but now he was determined to obliterate it entirely. As the banquet drew to a close, Lin returned home with his wife and daughter. Qin's mother leaned down to whisper to her youngest, noting that today had been a day of great harvest. Meanwhile, Ray caught a glimpse of her mother's sadness, a stark contrast to the festivities around them, and quietly confided in her father about it. Once they stepped inside the house, Li beamed with pride as she displayed the exquisite jewelry she had received from one of the nobles, gifts bestowed upon her upon learning she was the mother-in-law of the Supreme. Jiang gasped at the sight of the treasures, and both women erupted in delight, exclaiming that they were now rich. Amid the excitement, Qin maintained her composure and mentioned that she and Lin had something important to discuss. The women, still mesmerized by the glittering jewelry, hardly registered her words. Qin then turned to Ray, asking her to go to her room as they needed to have a serious conversation. She promised to come upstairs later to tuck her in, and Lin assured her he would be there too. Obediently, the little girl made her way upstairs, leaving all eyes on Lin. Someone in the room asked when he had woken up. Lin replied that it had happened suddenly, triggered by the sight of his daughter being bullied. Then, without warning, Qin slapped him across the face. Through her tears, she cursed him, lamenting that he could have told her sooner. So much pain could have been spared. Lin gently caught her hand, explaining that he had awakened, but had held back the truth, fearing she might choose another man. Qin turned her face away, releasing his grip. With a bitter confession, she admitted that she had no other choice if she wanted to ensure their daughter's safety and well-being. In that moment, Lin enveloped her in a warm embrace, whispering that she and Ray were the only ones he truly had. From this day forward, no one would dare to harm them again. Touched by his words, Qin returned the hug, and for the first time, Lin felt a sense of calm wash over him. He could finally concentrate on what lay ahead. It was time to unlock the royal bloodline and seek out the three great generals, the White Tiger, the Red Bird, and Zhu Wang, who would play crucial roles in his unfolding plan. The following morning, the family gathered around the breakfast table. Jiang casually browsed the news, her curiosity piqued by the images of her brother-in-law splashed across the internet. "Is it true? Are you really the Supreme Lin?" she asked, excitement lacing her voice as discussions of the powerful general's return swirled online. Lin merely shrugged, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Believe what you want," he replied nonchalantly. Seizing the moment to charm him, Jiang declared, "I've been taking care of you all this time, you know." Lin expressed his gratitude for her supposed concern, fully aware that she was being dishonest. Just then, the front door swung open with a crash. Qin's mother stormed in, clutching an envelope, with Zhu Guang trailing closely behind her. The elderly woman leveled an accusation at Lin, claiming he was masquerading as the Supreme and jeopardizing the Jiang family's very existence. With a steady demeanor, Qin inquired about the source of her outrage. The woman tossed the envelope onto the table, urging her to take a look for herself. As Qin opened it, Zhang wore a smug smirk, having uncovered the truth about him. The letter revealed that the protagonist hailed from Niliu village in the Quanhai district of Binhai City, labeling him as an unemployed man. Jin's heart raced with shock, but she steadfastly refused to believe her husband could be a fraud. Lin fixed her gaze on Zhang, her voice icy as she urged her to reveal her true intentions. With an air of arrogance, Sin's cousin declared that she had come bearing news from their grandfather. Effective immediately, they were all expelled from the Jiang family, and Jin was dismissed from her position at the company. She emphasized that, by their grandfather's decree, they were required to vacate the house without delay. Lin gazed at his daughter, gently asking if she wanted to live in a house with a view. Ray hesitated before answering, her voice quivering with uncertainty as she said yes. Jin, still reeling from the loss of her job, couldn't shake her anxiety about their future. Sensing her distress, her husband offered a comforting reassurance, insisting she had nothing to fear. Meanwhile, Li silently seethed, casting judgment on both her daughter and Lin, labeling them as two hopeless losers. Lin brushed off the negativity, his sole focus on protecting his wife and daughter. He called Xing, instructing her to pick them up and take them to the Bixu Lake area. Yan let out a mocking laugh, scoffing that Bixu Lake was a playground for millionaires, and accused Lin of lying once more about his supposed supremacy. Unfazed, Lin calmly told his wife to follow him, and she obeyed without hesitation. With a sneer, Yan questioned whether Lin intended to live on the streets alongside Jin and Ray. As they gathered their things to leave, Lin's mind drifted back to the house, a wedding gift from his late wife. Despite the memories it held, he was resolute in his decision to abandon it. Just then, Qing arrived. Zhang's eyes widened in recognition. She began to unravel the mystery of her brother-in-law's true identity. A sudden realization washed over her. Lin truly was the supreme. Determined to remain close to power, she tugged at her mother's arm, trying to persuade her to leave with them. However, Li, convinced that Lin was nothing but a fraud, stood firm and refused to budge. Frustrated by the lack of seriousness around her, Yan grumbled as they departed. Later, the protagonist arrived at their new property, ready to face whatever awaited them. Ray's eyes sparkled with excitement as she explored her new home. Lin turned to Qing, instructing her to keep a close eye on her daughter. Obediently, Qing guided Ray through every corner of the house, revealing its wonders. However, Lin soon noticed Qin's somber expression and asked if something was troubling her. Jin confessed her fear that all of this might just be a dream. Lin gently cupped her face, reassuring her that this was indeed reality and that they would find happiness as a family once more. Even though he hadn't fully regained his strength, he vowed to protect her, insisting that no one would ever bully her again. Yet, Jin remained unconvinced. In an effort to make her smile, Lin suddenly declared that he had purchased the only village in the entire city of Binhai, which overlooked the sea, and asked if she liked it. Jin erupted into laughter, teasing that people shouldn't discover the Supreme had such an adorable side. Lin replied that this side was meant only for his family. Just then, the phone rang, prompting him to step away to answer it. Jin took the opportunity to lead Ray inside while Lin handled the call. On the line, Lin assured the caller that he was already on his way. His wife, sensing the urgency, stopped pressing him for details. He explained that it was a call from the army and that he needed to leave for a while. Ray called out for her father to play with her, but Lin informed Qin that he would likely be away for 2 or 3 days. A wave of fear washed over her at the thought of abandonment, but she managed to force a smile, assuring him that she would take care of Ray while he focused on work. He kissed her forehead, promising that Qin would stay to protect them. Hours later, the protagonist arrived at the army office and called out for Long Tao. The soldier charged forward, enveloping Lin in a heartfelt embrace, expressing just how much he had missed him. The other soldiers, puzzled by the scene, exchanged confused glances until Long shouted, "This is Supreme Lin, the highest commander of the Binhai military department." Instantly, the men bowed their heads in deep respect. Long explained that he had stepped in as Supreme Commander during Lin's absence, but now he intended to relinquish the position. Lin raised an eyebrow, questioning whether he truly wanted to retire so soon after achieving the rank of Major General. With a heavy sigh, Long admitted that the command post had changed drastically, with nearly all positions now under the royal family's control. He expressed his relief and happiness at Lin's return. At last, fresh air would soon fill this chaotic environment. Lin pondered the likelihood of more royal family members infiltrating the command post. Noticing Lin's expression, Long asked if he truly believed that would happen. Lin responded with a question of his own, wondering if that wasn't the very reason Long had summoned him. Long sheepishly admitted it was, confessing that he had been so thrilled by Lin's return that he had nearly forgotten. He then retrieved several files, presenting them to the supreme leader. Inside were meticulously organized envelopes detailing the rotation of national military commanders since Lin's incapacitation. The reports also included vital updates on the ongoing battle at the border. Lin meticulously reviewed the documents and reassured everyone that nothing catastrophic was likely to occur, as the military departments were under royal command. However, Long immediately countered, emphasizing that this was exactly the problem. These royals, accustomed to unwavering respect, had no real understanding of how to lead an army. While the southern regions remained secure, 10 cities in the northwest were under bombardment, and they had no additional information to go on. News had been stifled, and their messenger had gone silent. Lin inquired whether the White Tiger was in the northwest and had indeed lost the 10 cities. Long confirmed her fears, explaining that it had been 5 long months since they last heard from the messenger. The protagonist then opened the secret message left by the White Tiger. The spy's report was grim. The northwest had fallen. The royal family was deeply involved, and he feared he might not survive until the supreme leader's awakening. His final request was simple. If he fell in battle, he asked that no one mourn him. Rage surged within Lin at the mere thought of losing his messenger. Long had often reminded him that the head of the military department was the Dragon Lord, making it all the more peculiar for the entire royal family to assert control. Lin confessed his doubts, revealing that he had dispatched someone to investigate the capital. In his mind, he concluded that Zhen Yan was prepared to sacrifice the entire country for his own benefit. 2 days later, the scene shifted to the Jian Company. Jin's grandfather sat in deep contemplation, wrestling with the uncertainty of whether firing his granddaughter had been the right choice. As Yan meticulously applied her lipstick, she attempted to reassure him, dismissing Lin as a fraud and labeling Sin as utterly useless. Yet the old man hesitated, his mind clouded with doubt. Since her departure, every business partner had pulled their investments, leaving the Jian family in dire straits. Playing the innocent, Yan insisted that everything would turn out fine, but the old man, unable to contain his frustration, slammed his hand on the table, his voice rising in anger as he declared that nothing would be fine. All their partners had abandoned them to join Lin. In her desperation, Yan lashed out, blaming her cousin for their predicament, insisting that none of this would have happened if the finance department hadn't fallen under Shin's control. Taking a deep breath, her grandfather urged her to hurry. They were about to meet the old man. Before his death, this patriarch had left behind a letter, meant to be opened only in times of absolute desperation. The grandfather believed the letter could be the key to saving the family. Later that day, the protagonist returned home. As he flicked on the lights, he inadvertently roused his wife, who had dozed off on the couch. Jin stirred and softly asked if he was back. Lin gently draped his coat over her, inquiring why she hadn't gone to bed yet. She smiled and replied that she had been waiting for him. Relieved to see him safe, she made her way to the room, urging him to get some rest as well. Just then, Qing appeared at the window. Lin inquired if she had any updates. Qing delivered 3 critical pieces of news. First, since Shin's departure from the company, all major partners had severed ties with the Jian family, resulting in losses so severe that the company was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. The Dragon Master was under house arrest. Though unharmed, his powers had been transferred to one of his former unknown rivals. Meanwhile, news had emerged about the White Tiger's messenger. 5 months prior, he had last been spotted at the northwest frontier in a place known as the Masterless Kingdom. Lin's expression darkened. He recognized the name all too well. Qing remarked that the place was now in ruins. Lin nodded, acknowledging that was all he needed to hear. This information confirmed his fears. A world of internal and external chaos was on the horizon. The next morning, the hero set about preparing a lavish breakfast, filling the air with a mouth-watering aroma that gently roused his family. Jiang, still half asleep, blinked in surprise at the sight of the beautifully set table, crafted with care by her brother-in-law. Lin explained that the meal was specially prepared for Ray and Shin. Just then, his wife appeared, rubbing her eyes and clearly exhausted. He pulled out a chair for her, teasing that she must not have rested well, having stayed up waiting for him. Jin confessed that she had been contemplating a new job the night before. Suddenly, Li's voice broke through the tranquil atmosphere, drawing everyone's attention. She declared it was time for Lin to repay the care he had received during the 2 years of his incapacitation. The mother-in-law demanded money as compensation, accusing him of being responsible for the family's downfall since his awakening. Shin quickly stepped in to defend her husband, urging her mother to stop spouting nonsense. Yet the woman persisted, hurling insults at Lin without restraint. Feeling embarrassed, Jin turned to her husband and apologized, explaining that her mother was primarily concerned with money. The protagonist chuckled, acknowledging that, in a way, his mother-in-law had a point. He did need to secure finances for their home. Seizing the moment, he gently inquired about how her father had passed away. Jin's expression softened as she replied, "My father died in a car accident." Seeking more information, Lin turned to Zhang, who admitted she didn't know much. However, she suspected that Yan and the others had framed her father, likely due to his selection as the heir to the Jian family by their great-grandfather. The relatives were furious, and when he passed away, their family received not a single penny of the inheritance. Enraged, Ray shouted that they had to reclaim her grandfather's rightful legacy. Irritated, Zhang snapped at her, insisting that a child knew nothing about such matters. But Ray, undeterred, pulled out a necklace her grandfather had given her, explaining that he had intended to gift it to her when the time was right. Lin took the necklace in his hand, instantly recognizing it as crafted from evolutionary stones. Jin, intrigued, recalled having seen the necklace once in her father's office. The protagonist sensed that this was no ordinary necklace. The royal family held unique lineage abilities, but to unlock their full potential, they needed an advancement spawn paired with a hidden method. Suddenly, a beam of blue light erupted from the necklace, encircling Lin's hand. Mesmerized, Ray snatched the stone from her father's grasp. It was too late to intervene. A blue glow enveloped the girl, causing both parents to scream in terror. The light surged into her stomach and disappeared. She collapsed for a moment, but quickly regained her footing, exclaiming that she felt something enter her belly. In a panic, Shin explained to Lin that the evolution stone had been activated by him, but it had chosen Ray on its own. It seemed her bloodline skill had finally awakened. There was no other option. He had to call Dr. Lee. The doctor answered quickly, his voice laced with concern. But before Line could explain, the phone slipped from his grasp and began to float in midair. Cutlery around the room followed suit, levitating as if under the influence of some unseen electromagnetic force. All of this chaos erupted due to Ray's newly awakened power. Meanwhile, Zhang was enjoying a peaceful day at the beach, her tranquility shattered by the distant screams of the residents. Suddenly, Lin burst out of the house, cradling his daughter in his arms. Jin followed closely behind, urgently warning her sister that it was too dangerous to stay. Confused and concerned, Jane tried to grasp the situation, but her sister had already left her behind. A massive shadow suddenly eclipsed the sun. Jiang looked up, frozen in place. An enormous wave loomed overhead, towering ominously. With a thunderous crash, it descended, knocking the girls to the ground. Jinlin shouted desperately for her sister to escape, but Jiang remained paralyzed, convinced they were under attack by a formidable army of the sea. Without hesitation, Jin sprinted forward, pulling along anyone she could. Meanwhile, Dr. Lee confronted the hero, questioning whether he was truly prepared to suspend the royal bloodline. Lin responded that Ray's true ability was electromagnetic power, a gift so rare it was only whispered about in royal legends. He refused to gamble with his daughter's safety, insisting that his plan must move forward. He then inquired if the 10 miles of coastline had been secured. Qing confirmed their readiness. Lin instructed her to prepare, and the group boarded the boat, setting their plans in motion. Dr. Lee began the acupuncture treatment on Lin, cautioning him that there were 9 prohibition levels to unlock, ascending from the bottom to the top. The protagonist steeled himself, fully aware of the steps he needed to take after each needle was inserted. As Dr. Lee reached specific meridians, he extracted something from Lin's back, eliciting a scream of agony. Despite the excruciating pain, Lin gritted his teeth and endured. So far, he had unlocked 5 layers, but Lee pressed on with this torturous method, knowing the hero still needed to break through 4 more. Ray watched, tears welling in her eyes, her heart aching for her father as she witnessed his suffering. But the procedure was far from over. As night descended and the sky darkened, a figure lurked in the water, watching the boat intently. He wasn't alone. Drawing a blade from his clothing, he signaled to his team that it was time to move. Suddenly, he was taken aback by an unexpected presence. Lin stood before him, her eyes blazing with fury. The enemy frantically attempted to report to his master, but before he could utter a word, a bolt of lightning struck him, electrocuting him instantly. Lin swiftly turned to Qing, reprimanding her for failing to keep watch over the sea, despite her earlier claim that no enemies were lurking. Ashamed, the girl lowered her head and offered a heartfelt apology for her oversight. The following day, the protagonist returned home to tend to his wife. Shin had come down with a fever, so he left her resting in bed. Shortly after, Lin approached Long, saying he had something important to discuss. Just then, his wife stirred, murmuring a few weak words. Concerned, he quickly moved closer, asking if she was all right. The first thing Shin wanted to know was where their daughter was. Lin reassured her that Ray was okay. Meanwhile, in another room, the doctor gently urged Ray to express how she was feeling. After a moment of contemplation, she replied that she wasn't sure and would need to ask her father. Just then, Lin entered, cradling Shin in her arms, and inquired about the situation. Overjoyed to see her mother awake, Ray dashed into Lin's embrace, relief flooding her face. The hero tenderly cradled his daughter, whispering that her mother needed to rest for now. Lee then turned to the Supreme, insisting that he must take the girl with him. Concern washed over Shin as he pressed for an explanation. Lin spoke with a calm assurance, revealing that Ray had awakened the power of the royal bloodline and required guidance. There was no one better suited for this task than Dr. Lee. The doctor joined the discussion, informing Shin that a fierce battle was raging in the northwest, yet the royal family was concealing the truth from the public, crafting a deceptive illusion of peace. He noted that Ray's awakening had come as a surprise, and that the one currently in control of the capital was a formidable enemy. This meant that Shin and her daughter could become the Supreme's vulnerable point if they failed to protect themselves. Despite this warning, Shin hesitated to leave, insisting that Ray should remain at home. Lee, however, patiently reassured her, explaining that he would only be with the girl for a year. He vowed to impart all the knowledge he had gained throughout his life, swearing that she would remain unharmed. The protagonist left the choice to his daughter, promising not to pressure her. As Ray envisioned the formidable foes her father would confront, a wave of fear washed over her. What if he were to be crippled once more? Driven by the desire to protect him, she made her decision. She would accompany the doctor. Lee admired her bravery and urged everyone to move quickly. Before departing, Ray handed him an agenda, asking him to keep it safe until their next meeting. She confessed that she felt they hadn't spent enough time together since his awakening. Lin, wearing a sorrowful expression, apologized for not being more available. Eager to leave, Ray tugged the doctor along, promising that she would return in the future. Shin barely had a moment to say goodbye before her daughter dashed out the door. Outside, Ray pondered the weight of her responsibility. She needed to protect her parents. Back inside, Lin reassured his wife, promising that their daughter would be all right. However, Shin, still anxious, pressed Lin for confirmation. He mentioned he had received news from his subordinates in the northwest, but vowed to get everything in order before setting off. The following day, in the Jian family's village, Shin looked at Lin in surprise and asked why they had come. Lin assured him that everything would soon be revealed. Just then, Shin's grandfather and her cousin approached them. The elderly man, with a stern expression, demanded to know the purpose of their visit. Lin took an envelope from Qing's hand and tossed it to the old man, urging him to read it. The documents held information collected by his subordinates earlier that very morning. As they read, the expressions of the old man and his granddaughter darkened. Turning to Shin, Lin disclosed the shocking truth. The car accident that had claimed her father's life was no accident. It had been deliberate. The mastermind behind this heinous act was none other than Yan. In a fit of rage, the cousin screamed, pointing an accusing finger at Lin, claiming he had fabricated the evidence. The old man, consumed by rage, struck his granddaughter across the face, confessing that he had been blind for years. Shin stood frozen, stunned by the revelation. As Yan attempted to defend herself, insisting that she hadn't killed their third uncle, she added that her only intention was to warn them that the Ginger family belonged to her and her father. She never imagined they were up against two true monsters. In the end, she concluded that their uncle had simply been unfortunate. Those monsters had torn him apart, so it wasn't her fault. The protagonist grasped the underlying meaning in her words, suspecting that others were involved in the so-called accident. However, Shin, bewildered by the subtle hints, shouted at his cousin to clarify everything. Just then, a voice emerged from the shadows, informing its master that Lin had taken notice of them. The protagonist let out a cold laugh, commenting that while the Jin family may have appeared to have gained weight, they were merely hiding rats within their walls. In an instant, Qing surged toward the source of the voice, moving with such speed that no human eye could track him. The old man pleaded with Lin, urging him not to take out his displeasure on the Jin family. Calmly, the protagonist responded that he was merely interested in identifying the rats lurking nearby. Moments later, Ching burst into a concealed room and tackled a blue-haired man. He laughed, taunting her that his mission was already accomplished and that she would never be able to restrain him. As he attempted to escape, a fierce fight broke out. Despite his struggles, Ching managed to subdue him and dragged him back to the main hall, unceremoniously throwing him at her master's feet. With no escape in sight, the man's body convulsed and transformed, two menacing horns sprouting from his forehead. Lin instantly recognized this as a mutation of the royal bloodline. Yan, her voice trembling with fear, pointed at the creature, exclaiming that it was one of the monsters that had slain her third uncle. The protagonist positioned himself in front of Shin, protecting her as he turned away from the fight. The loyal subordinate conjured a gleaming dagger in her hand. The mutant snarled, vowing to take her down before finishing off Lin. With his claws ablaze, he lunged at Ching, but she reacted with flawless precision. In a heartbeat, her dagger sliced across his neck. The mutant crumpled to the ground, choking on its own blood. Yan watched in disbelief, struggling to grasp how someone could fell such a monstrous creature with a single blow. As the enemy's body lay lifeless, Ching spotted something clutched in its hand. She picked it up and presented it to her master. Lin examined the small device, instantly recognizing it as a communication tool. A voice broke through the tension. It was Zhou Shan. On the other end, he inquired how Lin had discovered who was listening in. Lin's anger ignited. He had shown mercy to this man at the banquet, but now his patience had worn thin. The old man of the Jian family turned pale, apprehensive that the protagonist might confront Zhou, a member of a highly influential family. He pleaded with Lin to remember how the old master had once saved his life. Lin responded coldly, reminding him that when Master Zhang had rescued him, he had vowed to protect the Jian family for 30 years. But that promise was shattered the moment they insulted his wife. The bearded old man attempted to counter, arguing that one day Yixin would inherit the family, and he should reconsider his stance. Furious, Yan shouted at her grandfather, asserting that this family belonged to her and her father. Amid the chaos, Lin turned to his wife, urging her to make a decision. Without a moment's hesitation, Shin declared that she had no intention of returning. Her words left the grandfather in disbelief. After everything that had transpired, she felt no desire to live among these people, especially after being cast out of the family. Respecting her decision, the protagonist gently took her hand and led her out of the house. Despite the old man's shouts for her to wait, Lin stood her ground, asserting that this wouldn't be unfair to Master Zhang, who would personally handle matters with the Zhou family. From that moment on, any debt between him and the Jian family was erased. Outside, the old man and Yan seethed at how the situation had unfolded, their faces contorted with anger. As he turned to leave, Lin informed his wife that he would be away for 2 days to address a matter in the capital, entrusting Ching with her protection. Yixin worried that she was burdening her husband with too much responsibility, but Ching reassured her that Lin only needed to handle a single issue in the capital. Intrigued, Shin asked about the person Lin had been referring to. Who exactly was this figure in the capital? Ching revealed that the name belonged to Shen Yan, the most formidable member of the royal family in the capital. Though Shin had never heard of him before, the mere mention of his name sent a chill down her spine. Ching urged Shin to get in the car and return home while Lin handled the situation. A few hours later, at the Zhou family estate, the patriarch convened a meeting to discuss the ongoing investigation. He voiced his frustration over the lack of news about Lin and the Jian family. A man in a green hat responded, noting that the young emperor was becoming increasingly impatient. The Zhou family still had backing for now, but that support would vanish if they proved to be of no value. The head of the Zhou family nodded in understanding, acutely aware that his son had been defeated by that very man. The advisor in the green hat proposed they capitalize on Lin's incomplete recovery and eliminate him in a single blow. Just then, a loud crash reverberated through the room. Lin emerged, dragging Zhou by the hair, his cold gaze sweeping across the room in search of the one in charge. The man in the green hat stepped forward, his voice sharp as he demanded to know who had the audacity to invade their territory. Zhou, trembling with fear, shouted to his grandfather that this was Lin Feng. The old man erupted into hysterical laughter, mocking the protagonist for walking right into his trap. He taunted Lin, claiming he had saved them the trouble of hunting him down. Striking the ground with his cane, the patriarch activated a mechanism that sent a massive cage crashing down toward Lin. With a sneer, he advised Lin to surrender the Jian family and renounce his royal bloodline if he wanted to live like a dog. Otherwise, he would not leave alive, and his head would be presented to the young emperor. Zhou's father pleaded with the old man to wait, reminding him that his son was also trapped inside. Zhou's desperate cries for help echoed through the air. Finally, the protagonist released Zhou, a cold smile spreading across his face as he remarked that he despised being trapped with dogs. The last time he found himself in such a situation, his enemy had ended up dead. Zhou screamed once more, desperately calling for his father. The grandfather glared at Lin, warning him that if he continued his defiance, he would be eliminated without hesitation, his indifference toward his own grandson chillingly evident. With a swift press of a button on his cane, he unleashed a surge of lightning into the cage. Zhou's cries echoed through the room as he was electrocuted, while Lin remained unscathed, untouched by the brutal attack. Joe's father pleaded with the old man to stop, but the patriarch coldly responded that losing his grandson was a small price to pay for the rewards promised by the young master once Lin was dead. With a mocking tone, the protagonist questioned whether Shen Yan had already crowned himself a young emperor. He found it peculiar that the Zhou family's loyalty ran so deep, especially since Shen Yan hadn't even bothered to warn them that these tricks were futile against him. In an instant, Lin seized the bars of the cage and tore it apart with his bare hands. The old man staggered back, his eyes wide with disbelief, as he exclaimed that he had never witnessed such strength. Panicking, he called for reinforcements, summoning dozens of soldiers to his side. Now bolstered by their numbers, he commanded them to take Lin down. Bullets whizzed through the air, but they merely ricocheted harmlessly off Lin's shield, leaving him unscathed. He retaliated, charging forward and taking down the snipers with his bare hands. A second wave unleashed specialized arrows, but Lin deftly caught one mid-air between his fingers. The old man explained that these were armor-piercing rounds, crafted specifically to counter the royal family, now repurposed to serve the young emperor's ambitions. The soldiers escalated their assault, firing more ammunition while igniting the gasoline behind Lin. A massive explosion engulfed the area. The old man, convinced of his victory, proclaimed that even if his mansion was reduced to rubble, the threat had been vanquished. However, his joy was fleeting. From the flames, Lin emerged unscathed, moving like a ghost. In a swift motion, he struck, severing the old man's head from his shoulders. The patriarch crumpled to the ground, lifeless. The sole survivor was Joe's father. In his desperation, he cried out for the ultimate weapon to manifest. Suddenly, two monstrous figures emerged from the shadows. The boss coldly reminded them that Master Shen had commanded the eradication of the Jian family, and failure would mean their own demise. Lin quickly identified them as mutants, having absorbed fragments of the royal bloodline. They launched their assault in unison, overwhelming Lin with sheer numbers. But he was quicker. With a powerful punch, he struck the blue-skinned monster squarely in the face, sending it crashing into the wall. The red demon attempted a sneak attack, but Lin effortlessly blocked it and tossed the creature aside like a rag doll. Their mutations had enhanced their physical abilities and appearance, but it still wasn't enough to rival Lin's supremacy. Though intrigued by what made these mutants unique, Lin had no time to spare. He swiftly maneuvered through their defenses. At last, the protagonist triggered an explosive, engulfing the entire room in flames and concluding the battle with a thunderous blast. Meanwhile, Joe's father hurried to the office, desperate to report to the young emperor. Shen Yan's image flickered onto the big screen, his voice steady as he inquired about the situation. The man, visibly anxious, reported that Lin had gone straight to the Zhou family, and the most powerful weapon had been unleashed against him. With a commanding presence, the Dragon Lord insisted on speaking to the head of the family. Caught in a bind, the boss hesitated. He couldn't reveal that his father had fallen during the duel with the Supreme. Instead, he fabricated a story, claiming the old man was still in the fight. Shen confronted him, insisting he stop lying, as his face betrayed a deep despair. In that instant, a hand shot through the man's shoulder, and lightning engulfed his body. The protagonist had finally located Shen. The Dragon Lord chuckled, remarking that it was typical of the Supreme to boldly confront the Zhou family alone, and even dismantle their weapons. Lin acknowledged that the special armor-piercing bullets could indeed harm the royal bloodline, but he couldn't resist mocking Shen. He pointed out that Shen had forgotten the crucial detail. The weapon and the containment method had to be used together. In frustration, Shen mentally cursed the Zhou family, labeling them as foolish. Lin, tapping his own head, taunted Shen, suggesting that he needed a bit more intelligence to keep up with him. The Dragon Lord responded with a chilling calmness, asserting that the royal family was firmly under his control. He revealed that Lin's continued existence was merely a testament to his reputation among the people. With a sinister smile, he offered Lin a chance to submit and witness the true supreme act. In defiance, the protagonist shot back, accusing Shen of having slaughtered countless members of the royal family for his own glory, deeming his actions utterly ridiculous. Shen scolded Lin for his naivety, insisting that such innocence was a hindrance to gaining power. Just then, a countdown alarm blared, drawing the hero's attention. It was a self-destruct bomb planted by the Zhou family. Shen continued to lament the destruction of his supreme artifact, asserting that it was foolish to believe he could win this battle. In an instant, an explosion engulfed the entire mansion. Meanwhile, at the protagonist's home, Shen jolted awake, a sense of dread washing over him. She attempted to call her husband, anxious to ensure he was all right, but the line was unavailable. Just then, Qing entered the room, drawn by a strange noise. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Shen replied, her voice tinged with worry. "I'm just concerned about Lin. I had a nightmare." The subordinate reassured her, "Everything is fine with the master. However, if you really want to reach him, I can use the emergency contact channel." Shen realized that reaching out to her husband during a critical moment might only distract him, so she decided against contacting him and advised Qing to get some rest. Qing agreed, promising to be available if needed. With a sense of reassurance, Shen returned to bed, confident that Lin would be all right. However, the following day, she found herself at Banhai Center Hospital after feeling unwell the night before. The protagonist hurried to the hospital, anxious to find out what had happened. She approached the doctor, who reassured her that after some tests, the patient was fine. It seemed she was simply exhausted and would return to her usual self with some rest. However, Lin's concern deepened as she looked at the doctor and pressed for more information. With a serious expression, the doctor revealed that he had discovered something unusual during the complete examination, an abnormal discharge in her brain while she was sleeping. He handed the report to Lin, explaining that the abnormality resembled a shock, but he suspected the nightmare was likely a consequence of recent events. He assured Lin that he would handle it calmly and would provide confirmation later. Outside the building, a protest erupted, with the crowd demanding that the Chinese head of state be allowed to speak. Lin observed the chaos through the window, his expression grim. Suddenly, Qing burst into the infirmary, desperation etched on his face. "The situation in the northwest is completely out of the royal family's control," he exclaimed. News of the battle flooded the internet, and Lin finally grasped why the populace was in an uproar. He questioned whether the military units in the west and north were taking any action. His subordinate responded. The informant reported that both military departments have uncovered spies. Shenyan found herself buried under an avalanche of work, leading to a disastrous mistake. The contract was torn apart, revealing the truth to the world. Qing chimed in, noting that people across the globe had started online petitions, urging the general to assume the commander's position. She was eager to see how Lin would respond. The protagonist realized that the public was calling for the expulsion of the military department's commander in Banhai City, all due to his connections with the royal family. The crowd erupted in shouts, urging Lin to take command. Weighing his options, the hero instructed Qing to continue securing the area in his absence. The scene then shifted to the army office, where Long's irritation flared as someone entered without knocking. His anger quickly dissipated upon realizing it was Lin. "You can't be serious," Lin scolded him, his voice laced with frustration. "How can you sleep when the Northwest is in chaos?" The soldier jolted back to reality as Lin explained that he hadn't come to issue orders, but rather to request his assistance for a mission to the northwest. Long initially objected, insisting that no expedition should proceed without an officer in command. Lin quickly clarified that this wasn't an expedition at all. He simply wanted Long to accompany him. The soldier, unaware of the latest developments, was taken aback when Lin revealed that the situation had already leaked online. Fueled by determination, Long declared that all he needed was a gun to take down the invaders. One by one, he pledged to follow his old master in the fight to save China. Moments later, a helicopter touched down on the army's rooftop to collect the soldiers. Wang stood ready to receive the final orders before Lin's departure. The protagonist handed him the emblem of his private force, the Hejia army, and entrusted him with the responsibility of protecting the city of Banhai. He instructed Wang to use the emblem only as a last resort to provoke the black armored army. Wang smiled, reassuring his master that the city would remain under control. As he held the badge, he retrieved a pocket watch from his suit and handed it to Lin. Inside was a photo of Xin, a precious item she had asked him to deliver. Lin expressed his gratitude, promising that he would return safely to her. Long attempted to pull his friend back to reality, insisting that love could sap a man's fighting spirit and they needed to act swiftly. Just as they were about to depart, a voice called out for them to wait. Startled, the protagonist turned to see who it was and asked how he had gotten there. The blue-haired man replied confidently, "There's no place in China I can't reach." Lin felt a surge of satisfaction at Feng's presence, while Long stood in awe, taken aback by the sight of the Dragon Master before them. "With him on our side, our chances of victory have just skyrocketed," Lin declared, her confidence renewed. The trio boarded the airship, departing Banhai City with a sense of purpose. As they soared through the skies, Feng took the opportunity to explain the significance of his title. The position of Dragon Master was originally bestowed upon ordinary individuals, those without royal lineage, to oversee the military departments and maintain a balance of power against the royal family. Feng had been so engrossed in his research that he failed to notice Shen Yan had dispatched operatives to eliminate him. One fateful day, he was kidnapped and placed under house arrest in Shen Yan's residence, compelled to study the fusion of royal bloodlines and their descendants. When Lin inquired about the progress of his research, Feng wasted no time in responding, revealing that the fusion had shown promise at first. Shen Yan had harnessed the corpses of countless kings to quell the uprising of his bloodline. Feng had only managed to escape due to the ritual, which had momentarily stalled Shen Yan's plans. Lin reassured him that it was fortunate he was now safe. Just then, the driver interrupted, announcing they were 50 miles from Yingzhou City. The soldiers stood, preparing to jump from the vehicle. Before they leaped, Lin cautioned them that there was a strong possibility they would receive no reinforcements for this mission. He asked if they were certain about going. Long and Feng shouted that they were ready. Together, the three leaped from the helicopter. Later, they arrived in Yingzhou, situated in the northwest. As they entered the area, Long quickly realized that communications were down, and statistics were unavailable. The details about the territory remained shrouded in uncertainty. He approached a local resident for assistance, introducing himself as a member of the China Task Force. In response, the man abruptly slammed the door in his face. It became clear to Long that they were not welcome in this city. The protagonist suggested they gather the information on their own and asked Long to check the map for the distance to the fort. Long examined the map and replied, "Beyond the sand dunes, we still have 30 kilometers to go." As they strategized their next move, a little boy peered at them from behind the rocks, his curious eyes wide with intrigue. The protagonist stepped forward, offering a piece of chocolate in exchange for information. "Do you know where the headquarters are located?" he asked. Without a moment's hesitation, the boy snatched the candy and inquired, "Are the Chinese soldiers really going to fight the bandits?" When Lin confirmed, the boy beckoned for them to follow him. As they walked, the group learned that several intruders from the royal family had already infiltrated Yingzhou. The boy twirled a key around his finger, revealing that no one in the city would dare assist the soldiers. He spoke somberly of how his father had changed since his brother's death. With all the brave men in the area murdered, fear had silenced any whispers of information. He warned them that he would only offer his help once. If that wasn't sufficient, they would be on their own. With the key in hand, the boy unlocked a door, unveiling a hidden shelter. Inside, they discovered a group of Chinese soldiers, gravely wounded and marked by scars. The boy proudly declared that these men had been saved by him and his father the previous year. However, the soldiers looked on in fear, uncertain whether Lin's group was friend or foe. Lin recognized the men's accents matched the local dialect. He lowered his weapon slightly and clarified that he wasn't there to request their protection for the royal family. He simply wanted them to defend their own home. Meanwhile, the intruder group known as the Sand Wolves received word that additional Chinese soldiers had arrived in the city. Their leader fired several shots into the air, demanding that the villagers surrender the soldiers. He promised a reward, but fear kept everyone locked inside their homes. The same villager who had earlier slammed the door on Long now cowered within his house as the intruders attempted to break it down. The leader, a man with a tattoo snaking across his neck, shouted that if no one revealed the soldiers' whereabouts, he would set the entire village ablaze. Unbeknownst to the bandits, a long-range weapon lay silently aimed at them. The Sandwolves were blissfully unaware that they were already in the crosshairs. Confident in their advantage, they prepared to ignite the residents' homes, hoping to force them into submission. But just as they were about to strike, one of the intruders was suddenly shot in the head, collapsing lifelessly to the ground. His companions whirled around, frantically searching for the unseen assailant. Lin emerged from the shadows, swiftly neutralizing his target with silent precision. The Samuels were taken completely by surprise, unprepared for the strength of this soldier. The attack was so discreet that the remaining bandits continued to threaten the villagers, blissfully unaware that death lurked just behind them. Lin tossed a rock to catch one man's attention, taunting them with a smirk, remarking on their impressive lack of alertness. The attacker spun around, firing wildly with both guns, but Lin effortlessly overpowered him. With a cold gaze, Lin remarked that the man could never hope to win with mere weapons. The intruder, stunned, realized too late that he was facing the Supreme himself. Lin swiftly took him down, gun aimed squarely at the man's head, and warned him to be more attentive when they crossed paths in the next life. A single shot brought him down. Another intruder, witnessing the scene, attempted to conceal himself but was quickly caught while trying to sneak up on Lin. Trembling, he fell to his knees and pleaded for mercy. Lin's voice was cold as he asked if the man had shown any mercy to the residents of the Northwest. The intruder remained silent, and with that, he too met his end. The villager, peering through a crack in his door, witnessed the chaos unfold before him. Lin turned to him, commanding him to remain inside until every intruder had been dealt with. The man complied, his voice trembling as he asked if China was truly there to save them. Lin assured him it was true. Moments later, reinforcements from the Sand Wolf Squad arrived, resuming their relentless pursuit. Meanwhile, the protagonist climbed atop a nearby house, seeking a better vantage point to assess the approaching enemies. At just the right moment, he leaped down, firing both pistols and striking several targets while others scrambled to escape. From his window, the old man watched in awe as Lin faced a swarm of men, all on his own. Transitioning to hand-to-hand combat, Lin dispatched the intruders with devastating punches. The villager couldn't help but recall the last time he had witnessed someone with such incredible strength. It was the man leading the Sand Wolves. The commander of the reinforcement squad seethed with anger as he realized his men were paralyzed by fear at the sight of a single Chinese soldier. He berated them, calling them pathetic losers. But then, an unsettling silence fell over his troops, sending a chill down his spine. Just then, Lin emerged from the shadows behind him, having swiftly dispatched the mercenary standing next to him. The man raised his gun in a panic, but Lin effortlessly crushed a barrel with his bare hand. Two soldiers, witnessing their boss's struggle, opted to flee, abandoning the fight to save their own skins. One by one, the rest of the squad followed suit, sprinting away in a desperate escape. Meanwhile, the protagonist team, positioned atop a mountain, unleashed a barrage of precise shots, raining down on the intruders with deadly accuracy. In that tense moment, the enemy boss taunted Lin, branding him a coward for aiming a gun at an armed man. Lin met her gaze with icy resolve and asked if she truly believed it was honorable for her group to threaten unarmed citizens of their own country. To him, there was nothing heroic about plunging the people of China into misery just to gain a few inches of land. The boss smirked, confidently asserting that he wasn't mistaken. He invited Lin to take her shot if she dared. However, she made it clear that she possessed crucial information about how to reach the headquarters, which she could leverage to assist him. In a dramatic reveal, she removed her cap, exposing her true identity as a woman. Their exchange was abruptly interrupted by Long, who reported to the Supreme that the mercenaries who had escaped from Yinzhou City at Point A were now surrounded and facing extermination. He fell silent when he noticed the woman conversing with Line. Suddenly, she sneered, declaring that her head ached just from the sight of the Supreme Trash, the puppet Dragon Master, and the little follower named Long. It was clear she was well acquainted with her enemies. Long aimed his gun at her, demanding to know how she dared to insult the Dragon Master and the Supreme. In response, the woman attempted to negotiate for her life, proposing a deal. Her condition for revealing the headquarters location was her release. Lin responded coldly, stating that he didn't make deals with those of unknown origin. Undeterred, she attempted to intimidate him, acting as if he needed her. Growing impatient, Lin seized her by the neck with a firm grip, lifting her off the ground. Struggling to catch her breath, she finally relented and gasped that she could lead him to Eaglehead Castle. As she collapsed to the ground, she fought to regain her composure, muttering that she had heard the rumors but never imagined he would recover his strength so swiftly. Now, genuine fear for her life gripped her. Meanwhile, Lin began assigning tasks with a sense of urgency. Long was assigned to keep a watchful eye on the girl, while Feng focused on organizing the troops in Eagle Point City. Their primary objective was clear: to defend this location, their sole fortress. Feng nodded in agreement and promptly appointed the injured Chinese commander from earlier to oversee the soldiers' arrangements. Later that day, the girl walked alongside them, her hands bound, sharing vital information as they moved forward. She explained that the Sand Wolf Squad patrolled twice a day and would dispatch more soldiers if the first team failed to return. The protagonist interjected, asking how far it was to Eaglehead Castle. With a vague response, she mentioned they would reach it after climbing a few more sand dunes. However, as Feng checked the map, he realized she was lying. They were actually moving in the opposite direction, heading toward the edge of the desert. Long drew his gun, warning her not to try any tricks. His patience was wearing thin. The mercenary feigned innocence, insisting she was merely trying to stop Lin from facing 10,000 men alone, claiming her intentions were purely to help. Just as Lin opened his mouth to respond, a yellow car soared over the dunes, landing in front of them and sending sand flying in all directions. The protagonist turned to the girl and asked who these people were. She replied that they were members of the Vulture's patrol team, the most ruthless squad within the Eaglehead group, infamous for slaughtering any Chinese they encountered. As the enemies emerged from their car, their bald leader declared that he would take the girl, while the others could decide the fate of the rest. Lin swiftly snatched the knife from his partner and, in a matter of moments, dispatched the entire vulture group. The girl stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend how the strongest battalion had fallen in an instant. Her thoughts were interrupted as the protagonist returned the dagger to his partner. With a serious tone, he offered the woman one final chance to reveal the truth. She finally confessed that she could guide them to the castle, but cautioned that Eaglehead Castle was easy to defend and difficult to assault. It boasted a 24-hour sensor recognition system and battlefield surveillance radar. Their main worry now was whether the Sandwolves had already picked up on their presence. Feng, however, assured them he had it covered, boasting that hacking the repeater and intercepting the surveillance video was a breeze. Long quickly praised his partner's intelligence. "Everyone, get in the car. We need to move now," Lin commanded, urgency lacing his voice. Minutes later, the stolen vehicle raced toward Eaglehead Castle. The mercenary warned, "We're getting close." Just then, the car fell into the crosshairs of a Vulture Squad sniper. The shooter hesitated, recognizing his companion's vehicle. However, upon closer inspection, he realized the driver wasn't the bald leader he expected. Meanwhile, Lin had already spotted the sentries concealed nearby. Seizing the moment, he signaled Long to take action. The soldier swiftly climbed onto the car's roof and began picking off the Vulture snipers one by one. Enemy bodies tumbled from the dunes as the speeding car barreled through, crushing those in its path. The mercenary cautioned that at this pace, they would become easy targets. Lin, unfazed, replied coolly that he never claimed they were going to sneak in. As sentinels rushed toward the commotion, panic set in when Lin's car soared over their heads, leaving them in a state of utter despair. The soldiers scramble to activate the warning alarm for intruders, but Long is quicker. He fires at the nearby gasoline buckets, igniting a series of explosions. Amidst the chaos, the mercenary shouts that Eaglehead Castle holds numerous Chinese hostages, warning that Long's reckless actions could endanger their lives. Unfazed, the protagonist dismisses the girl's warning and turns to Feng, asking how long it will take to breach the enemy's defense system. The Dragon Master examines the device, noting with concern that it's nearly out of power. Just then, an aircraft swoops down from above, hot on their tail. The mercenary yells in panic, identifying it as the armed reconnaissance aircraft of the Sandwolf Squadron. They need to find a way out, fast. Lin turns to Long, shouting that the choice is his. Without hesitation, Long leaps from the car as his partner takes the wheel, determined to steer them to safety. The soldiers aboard the aircraft are taken aback as the protagonist leaps into the air, his figure suddenly appearing at their window. In response, a Vulcan cannon mounted beneath the aircraft whirs to life, but Lin effortlessly tears it from its moorings with a single hand. An explosion erupts, illuminating the sky in a brilliant flash. Long chuckles, remarking that only the boss could pull off such a feat. The protagonist then returns to the car, turning to Long and instructing him to join him. Inside the walls of Eaglehead Castle, the soldiers brace themselves, fully aware of the impending invasion. Suddenly, the gate shatters under a bolt of lightning unleashed by the ultimate. The protagonist's eyes blaze red as his power surges to life. In a dramatic entrance, a stolen car crashes through the gates, paving the way for their assault. Chaos ensues as the Vulture Squad swiftly eliminates numerous soldiers, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Lin radiates an overwhelming power, causing the ground to tremble and crack beneath him. Without warning, a hole erupts in the stone wall. From his vantage point, the head of Eaglehead Castle observes with a grin, curious about the identity of this formidable man. Lin's attention shifts as he notices a tank rolling forward, its cannon trained directly on him. The soldiers of the castle erupt in cheers at the arrival of Chief Ding. In an instant, a bomb is launched from the tank, hurtling toward the protagonist. He dodges effortlessly, sending the bomb hurtling back toward the castle soldiers. The explosion claims more lives, infuriating the boss, who bellows at Lin not to underestimate him. In a fit of rage, the man attempts to run Lin over with the tank, but his efforts are in vain. With determination, Lin grips the vehicle and channels a surge of electricity through it. Ding senses the overwhelming chi radiating from Lin, yet he remains confident. He fires another shell directly at the hero. To his shock, Lin catches the bomb with his bare hand, halting it right in the barrel. An explosion erupts, but the protagonist emerges unscathed. With a smirk, he calls Ding a sneaky rat before charging into the castle. Inside, he discovers the room where the hostages are confined. A woman clutches her son tightly, her voice trembling as she asks if he was sent by China to rescue them. Lin nods in affirmation and instructs the hostages to follow him. Meanwhile, outside, a fierce battle rages between the castle soldiers and the protagonist's team. Long, fueled by adrenaline, barrels through the enemy ranks, relishing the chaos. He then leaps from the car, dragging a mercenary along with him, ready to face whatever comes next. At that moment, a voice calls out, "Sister Yaibing." The hostage, freed by the protagonist, rushes forward and embraces the girl, relief flooding his voice as he exclaims he thought she was dead. The mercenary beams with joy, realizing everything is all right. Meanwhile, the little boy glares at Long, demanding to know why he tied up his sister. The protagonist responds calmly, "It's simple. This beautiful girl is actually a demon who kills without hesitation." The boy cries out in desperation, insisting that it's not true. He argues that the hostages would have been killed if not for Sister Yaibing. With determination, he unties her, urging her to tell everyone that she isn't a bad person. Just then, other hostages chime in, supporting his claim. They share their story, revealing that many of them were traveling across the northwest border of China when they became trapped in the chaos of battle. Fortunately, Yiping arrived just in time to save them. Upon learning this, the protagonist resolves to free her. The mercenary breathes a sigh of relief, noting that her hands have never been stained with the blood of the Chinese people. Yiping then confesses that she is a secret agent infiltrating the Sandwolf squad, tasked with relaying vital information to the Chinese army. During her mission, she uncovered a fierce competition among the three main factions: the Sandwolves, the Ancient Snake, and the Grizzly Bear. In this tense moment, retreat emerges as the wisest choice. Yiping proposes it, fully aware that Lin would never consider backing down. As expected, Lin commands Long to escort the hostages back to the city. Concern flickers in the soldier's eyes, but Lin reassures him, declaring his intent to push forward and reclaim China's lands. With a chuckle, Long replies that he will stand by Lin's side. Yiping insists on joining the mission, declaring her desire to reclaim China's territory more fervently than anyone else. She argues that without someone familiar with the region, locating the ancient territory of the snakes would be nearly impossible. The protagonist initially resists, believing someone must remain behind to protect the hostages. However, both Long and Yiping passionately plead their case, making it difficult to ignore their determination. Lin ultimately concludes that the best course of action is to organize supplies so they can all depart together. After addressing the immediate issues, he finds his thoughts drifting to his wife, hoping she is safe. The scene then shifts to Axon's property, where Ching suggests that the protagonist's wife should get some rest, as she has been awake since the previous day. Jin remains silent, prompting her subordinate to press on. "You know the Supreme wouldn't be pleased if he found out how hard his beloved has been working for the new company," she insists, trying to coax her into taking a break. Jin expresses her desire to contribute to the country just like everyone else. Her research reveals that after one of the partners severed ties with the Jian family, he established a new company that could rival the Mei family. While this information may not directly aid the nation, Xin senses that Binhai City is on the brink of chaos. Her gaze shifts to a framed family photo, a poignant reminder of what's at stake. Lin and Rui are the most important people in her life. Moved by the scene, the subordinate silently vows to the protagonist that she will assist his wife in stabilizing the situation in Binhai City and will not let him down. As night falls swiftly, the protagonist sets up camp. Lying down, he gazes at his wife's photo nestled within his pocket watch. He kisses the image, whispering a promise to return soon. The next day dawns, and the hostages gather their remaining supplies. Fortunately, they have enough food and protection to sustain themselves. The old man expresses his gratitude to the protagonist, assuring him that the hostages will be safe as they make their way to Eagle City. Lin feels a wave of relief wash over her. Hours later, the group arrives in the Northwest's most chaotic city. The invaders have taken over, and Yiping insists there's no choice but to keep moving. Long glances at the boss, seeking confirmation on whether they should proceed, only to realize that the protagonist has already forged ahead. He contemplates following, but pauses as he notices Yiping and Feng frozen in place, staring at the map in disbelief. It dawns on them. They are standing in no man's land. Long asks what that means, and Yiping explains that this area has no master and is the most complex region in the Northwest because superpowers don't function here. Suddenly, the protagonist halts mid-flight and begins to plummet. Long exclaims in alarm, but Yiping scolds him, insisting they are in serious trouble. Meanwhile, Lin continues to fall. Meanwhile, a girl relaxes in the pool of her building, enjoying the serene atmosphere. Suddenly, the tranquility shatters as the glass ceiling breaks apart, and Lin plunges into the water right in front of her. Alarmed, her subordinate rushes over to investigate the commotion. Confused and disoriented, the protagonist grapples with the mystery of his vanished supernatural powers. Just then, a gun is thrust against his temple, heightening the tension. The subordinate fails to recognize him, but the girl in the pool does. Her eyes widen as she realizes it's the Supreme, and she wonders how he arrived so swiftly. Intrigued, the woman wraps her arms around Lin from behind, playfully asking if he would consider being her lover. The protagonist quickly responds, "I'm married." She gasps, her voice rising as she admonishes him not to reject her so easily. Undeterred, she boldly slides her hand between his legs, determined to win him over. In a heartbeat, Lin seizes her hand with a fierce grip, warning her that he won't hesitate to destroy her. A subordinate, eager to act, asks for permission to shoot. But the protagonist, losing his temper, crushes the man's gun in his fist. The woman watches, her interest in Lin deepening. Even without his superpowers, he showcases remarkable strength and fighting prowess. The muscular man delivers a powerful punch, sending everyone scrambling as smoke fills the air. Embarrassed by his own weakness, one of the men suggests they tie the brute up and sell him. This idea infuriates the girl. "How are we supposed to tie him up if we can't even defeat him?" She snaps. Frustrated, she insists they need to devise a better plan to earn South Supreme's protection. The smoke lingers endlessly, and in the distance, a woman calls to her companion, requesting something to wear. Suddenly, our protagonist emerges from the haze, charging toward them. The man quickly raises his hands, urging him to pause. "Wait, my master is getting dressed. It's not polite to attack a lady at such a moment." Just then, the woman finishes dressing and confidently declares that she will be taking the protagonist with her, asking, "What do you think about that?" He replies that he plans to wipe out the sandwolves, and that includes her. Undeterred, the woman counters, confidently asserting that he will surely agree to her terms. With a sultry confidence, she reveals her alluring figure, suggesting she possesses something he truly desires. And perhaps, just perhaps, she does. But as the saying goes, not everything that glitters is gold. Our protagonist begins to question whether this woman knows his true identity. Is that her plan? To blackmail him? The woman continues, revealing that Supreme must have sensed the unusual magnetic field surrounding Earth, which could interfere with special abilities. She explains that without his powers, Supreme would face significant challenges. However, the protagonist confidently assures her that it won't be a problem. Undeterred, she presses on, mentioning an ancient, mysterious seal hidden in the Earth's core, intricately linked to the magnetic field. If he removes that seal, his powers will be fully restored. To reach that place, he must completely trust and cooperate with her. She asks if he's willing to take that leap. Sensing the malice in her tone, he questions her true intentions. Just then, someone interrupts. A man steps forward, gun in hand, and demands to know if he's the one who fired earlier. It turns out the woman's soldier had been captured and we hadn't even noticed. The man addresses our protagonist as boss, suggesting that the others likely arrived due to the sound of gunfire. He inquires about their numbers and which tribe they belong to. The man replies that they are from the Sandwolves tribe. Our protagonist decides it's time to leave. Meanwhile, the alluring woman, her curves defying the laws of physics, proposes that since they share the same goals, they should work together. The guy with the gun blushes, his mind clearly elsewhere. The temptations are all too apparent. Suddenly, the girl pulls a weapon from her back, reminding him that they can't afford to be careless. Yet, our protagonist remains unfazed. To him, women are already deadly weapons in their own right. What he's witnessing now is merely a deadly weapon wielding even more deadly weapons. As they converse outside the building, a group of armed men with poorly rendered AK-47s approaches. The woman nudges her friend, urging her to get into character. Suddenly, the entire area seems to be flooded. The men quickly retreat to the back door, seeking refuge. Meanwhile, the invaders step inside and are immediately captivated by the sight of two stunning women in flawless outfits. The seductive atmosphere envelops the room, leaving the intruders entranced. The woman invites them to join in on the fun. Excitedly, they begin to shed their clothes, believing they're in for a wild time. Just as they leap toward the girls, the white-haired one ducks and shoves her friend underwater. In that moment, hidden soldiers spring into action, opening fire and swiftly eliminating every man on the brink of realizing his deepest fantasy. They had been deceived. The two sirens, concealed beneath the water surface, were entirely unharmed. Once again, their stunning forms emerged from the watery trap. It was a shame that the smoke obscured the very view they longed to appreciate. And still, it lingered, a persistent barrier. Strangely enough, they didn't even know each other. The woman introduces herself as Bingzi and inquires about the name of the white-haired girl. The girl responds cryptically, calling herself the leader of the ancient snakes. Bingzi narrows her eyes, clearly skeptical, and questions what she means by leader. The tension between them is palpable. Just then, our protagonist approaches, announcing that everything is taken care of. In the background, a man asks if they can at least assist with carrying the bodies. The pink-haired guy cheers, exclaiming that this victory feels utterly refreshing. Beside him, a sycophant seizes the moment to lavish praise on his master, claiming she worked tirelessly for this win. However, this absurd display fails to stir our protagonist. Instead, he's preoccupied with pondering the true intentions of the snake leader. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a different location, where a woman expresses her heartfelt gratitude to a man for all he has done. Without his assistance, things might not have turned out so well. The man smiles, insisting she's being too kind. He was merely doing his job. As he speaks, he hands her a list detailing the members of Binhai's political and business alliance. Scanning the papers, the blonde girl notices a multitude of names, prominent figures deeply entrenched in political movements. She wonders aloud why they all hail from emerging powers. The man explains that she lacks the resources to join the police and business alliance. She nods in agreement, expressing her genuine gratitude. Without the support of many, especially the Wong family, she acknowledges that she would never have reached her current position, let alone become president. After a moment of contemplation, she ultimately agrees with the man's suggestion. Then she suggests they join forces with the emerging powers as well. The man is taken aback by the girl's audacity. She presses on, revealing that there's data about a distorted magnetic field that absorbs bloodline energy, precisely what Shen and his ritual are seeking. The man grows uneasy at this revelation and mentions that they've discovered a traitor within the military who had been researching the meteorite. In an instant, his tone changes. He declares that this only underscores the true value of the meteorite. The girl nods in agreement, suggesting he use the lab as a front to draw in more investment. She also encourages him to assemble a new team and expand their operations once the Northwest is stabilized. They reach a consensus and shift their focus to other matters. Once again, the man commends the girl, remarking on her excellent judgment. Another woman approaches Ms. Zhang, offering her congratulations. As she smiles, her mind drifts to a saying she once heard. The husband manages external affairs, while the wife oversees the internal ones. She can't help but question whether she is fulfilling her role effectively. Later that night, the atmosphere in Binhai's banquet hall is electric with celebration. A man steps forward, calling for everyone's attention to deliver a congratulatory speech. He announces the arrival of President Zhang Xihui. She strides in, captivating everyone in a stunning dress that accentuates her remarkable curves. Grabbing the microphone, she expresses her gratitude to everyone for their presence and support. On behalf of the entire group, she extends her heartfelt congratulations. As the party continues, guests mingle and exchange greetings. Meanwhile, the girl in the white cloak remains silent, lost in her own thoughts. She makes a solemn promise to protect everyone, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, we return to our group of protagonists, who find themselves surrounded by rubble. The guy with the braided hair is being bandaged, nursing his injuries. The girl teases him, saying that despite his tough appearance, he's surprisingly sensitive to pain. With a childlike pout, he replies that he never expected the grass to be so poisonous. Another girl has had enough of him. All she asked was for him to clear the area, and somehow he ends up cut by grass and poisoned. It's absurd. He offers an apology, but it's clear he isn't taking the situation seriously. After all, he's captivated by an incredible sight. Unfortunately, that pesky white smoke is obscuring the view. But not for long. As the smoke dissipates, the woman inquires about the exit, offering her assistance since she knows the area well. However, the tension between them is palpable. She insists that the other woman should find her own way out. While they bicker over trivial matters, the protagonist stands by, silently observing the absurdity of the situation unfold. Frustrated, the white-haired woman commands her guards to attack the other girl. One of the men hesitates, grappling with his conscience. He can't bring himself to strike such soft and beautiful skin. His leader, however, is furious, accusing him of betraying his loyalty over something so trivial. Meanwhile, the girl who was meant to be beaten simply laughs, finding the entire scene utterly amusing. It's amusing to see her attempt to give orders to such clumsy men. As she observes, the pink-haired guy approaches and asks if she's laughing at something. They share a glance, and indeed, it's quite the sight. The woman grumbles that while being ugly isn't an issue, being both ugly and disloyal. Now that crosses the line. The man, attempting to defend himself, claims that while he may be ugly and disloyal, at least he possesses humility. So, he figures, that's something. But our protagonist has reached his limit. He interrupts, asserting, that's enough. We all need to focus on the same goal. Trivial matters shouldn't even be on the table. His commanding presence leaves the girl thoroughly impressed. She praises him and inquires about his plans. The protagonist's friend remarks on his incredible power, noting that Supreme Ling truly lives up to his name. However, he lacks any semblance of compassion. Meanwhile, the girl in the back rolls her eyes at his demeanor, finding humans to be complicated and utterly irritating. A bird soars through the sky, seemingly insignificant to us. Meanwhile, the crew arrives at a new location by car, drawing closer to the ancient snake's territory. The pink-haired man raises his gun, irritation etched on his face as he remarks that the bird flying overhead is getting on his nerves. "We should feast on its meat," he declares. However, the other crew member interjects, trying to be the voice of reason. "You can't just eat anything out there," he replies, cautioning against impulsive decisions. What if it's diseased? The thought barely crossed his mind before he pulled the trigger. The bullet struck its target, but it wasn't just any bird. It was a vulture. A drop of blood splattered onto the pink-haired guy's head, yet the bird remained airborne. Confused, he questioned whether he had missed, but deep down, he knew he hadn't. As he peered closer, he discovered that he had indeed hit something, just not the bird itself. He fired at the hand the vulture was clutching, but his determination remained unshaken. "Now I'm really going to take it down," he declared, lining up another shot. Just then, an annoyed girl stepped in, activating her powers with fierce concentration poised to strike. But once again, that pesky white smoke enveloped the scene, ruining the moment for everyone. Just as she prepared to strike, a deafening sound echoed through the air, stunning everyone present. A bird plummeted from the sky, landing right at their feet. And the one responsible for this unexpected turn of events? Our protagonist. One shot, no mistakes. They hurried to investigate the mysterious hand clutched in the bird's beak. Meanwhile, the watching woman couldn't shake the feeling that something was definitely amiss. She remarks that such occurrences are rare in ancient snake territory. The protagonist approaches and quips that these people certainly have a peculiar way of welcoming guests. Curiously, he asks what she's holding. She responds, revealing it to be the double serpent scepter, a sacred artifact from the ancient snakes meant to control animals. However, it seems to have had no effect on that vulture at all. However, our protagonist isn't concerned with the bird at all. His attention is fixated on something far more disturbing, a severed human arm. Why would a vulture be carrying such a gruesome trophy? Where did it come from? Just then, the man with glasses steps forward, eager to examine the arm. He notes that the blood is still fresh, suggesting that the owner might still be alive, or at the very least, didn't die long ago. The skin tone and texture of the arm suggested it belonged to someone from the old snake tribe. The woman gasped in shock, realizing it was one of her own people. Just then, a gust of wind swept through, drawing their attention toward the village. Could the enemy have already launched an attack? The scene shifts to the central gymnasium of Binhai City. A figure studies a map, tracing the positions of families scattered across the east, west, and north. With war looming and scouts on the move, the threat of spies lurks in every shadow. Time is of the essence. They must act swiftly before the army makes its advance. Anxiety grips them as they consider the possibility that scouts, or even soldiers, may have already infiltrated Binhai. The woman shouts, inquiring if the black armored army is prepared for battle. The soldiers hesitate for a moment before responding in unison, declaring their readiness. She beams with pride at their spirited response. Suddenly, a man with an eye patch steps forward, urgency etched on his face. He informs her that the Azure Dragon is already deploying special forces across the 8 main streets of Binhai. Her expression darkens as she scolds him, incredulous that he would shout such classified information so carelessly. Realizing the damage has been done, she instructs him to pinpoint their location on the map. The man awkwardly scratches his shoulder, mumbling that he'll do it right away. He steps forward, confidently declaring that the Azure Dragon is, well, wherever he was thinking. But the truth is, he's completely forgotten. After a moment of contemplation, he points to Honglong Street, but quickly reconsiders, suggesting it might actually be the Lu Feng Clinic. Qing remains vigilant. After all, the Lu Feng Clinic is where Rui and Dr. Li are located. Without a second thought, she resolves to investigate every location displaying unusual activity on the map and instructs the officer to accompany her. The subordinate can't shake a sense of foreboding, suspecting that an enemy may already be aware of her plan to deploy special soldiers to monitor the heart of Binhai. If she is correct, the enemy has likely moved ahead. As they navigate the streets, Qing inquires about the whereabouts of the people he had planted. The man gestures toward a nearby corner. They press on, and the subordinate wonders whether the officer arrived by car or on foot. Azure simply replies that she will know when they arrive. Qing begins to suspect there may be a traitor within the Black Armor Army. The officer may not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but she can't think of anyone else who could be the traitor. Years ago, Ozderer was frequently punished for his thievery. Even after joining the Black Armor Army in search of a better life, he remained restless and unfulfilled. Qing contemplates ending him right then and there, but hesitates, mindful of Ozderer's superior. Instead, she resolves to wait, hoping to draw him into her territory. Soon, Ching encounters the special forces that the officer had secretly deployed. Without warning, she launches a swift attack, swiftly neutralizing the two men. One of the suspected spies accuses Azure of deceit. Just then, the man seizes control of his clothing and presses a hidden button, declaring that it's time to begin. Ching finds herself surrounded by a fleet of cars, the tension thick in the air. With a powerful leap from her spy trampoline, she soars into the air, questioning the mediocrity of the trap laid before her. Her primary target is the traitor, but his allies are relentless, barreling toward her at full speed in their vehicles. Drawing on her super strength, Ching kicks the cars aside with ease, redirecting her focus back to the traitor. To her astonishment, her kick is suddenly blocked. As the soldier lands on the ground, he questions whether she forgot that the squad's armor is reinforced. Azure smirks, pointing out that the parking lot isn't just any random spot. Suddenly, his allies charge toward her once more. Confident in his victory, the soldier prepares for the confrontation, but in an instant, he and his comrades find themselves ensnared by a mysterious supernatural force. Even Ching begins to levitate, caught in the grip of this otherworldly power. Rui taps into her lineage power, and her subordinate's eyes light up with delight as he recognizes the strength of the little princess. The traitor's blunder was leading Ching to a parking lot near the clinic where the protagonist's daughter was staying. Dr. Li gives a thumbs up, commending Rui for her impressive display. Overwhelmed with emotion, Rui cries out that she missed Ching. The subordinate tenderly brushes his fingers against the little princess's face, telling her just how amazing she truly is. The doctor chuckles, remarking that those traitors never anticipated the extent of the girl's power. Rui, determined to stay strong and protect her family, reflects on her efforts. Just then, the protagonist's wife rushes to her daughter, beaming with joy. Jin had been summoned by Ching the moment Rui unleashed her supernatural abilities. They embrace tightly, and the mother showers her with questions, eager to know if Rui has been eating well during her cultivation and whether she followed Master Li's instructions. The man admits that Rui had complied to some extent. Ching swiftly shifts the conversation, congratulating the protagonist's wife on the success of their political and business alliance. Jin acknowledges that she needed to discuss it. Her somber expression betrays the truth. Things are not going as smoothly as hoped. She confesses that the challenges are tougher than she anticipated, but she is determined to overcome every obstacle for the sake of her family. Rui's eyes widen with concern as she asks where her father is. Jin reassures her, promising that they will see him soon. Meanwhile, Ching steps aside, grappling with her emotions. She never anticipated a traitor lurking within the ranks of the Black Armor Army. Despite her turmoil, her resolve hardens. She will protect the protagonist's family until his return. Later, Azure is dragged into the office, bound and helpless. Ching confronts him, demanding the truth. The man claims he has no family or friends, leaving only his life as a threat. Ching presses the blade against his neck, her voice steady as she tells him it's perfectly fine if he refuses to talk. With a swift motion, she retrieves the controller he had hidden in his mouth and shatters it. Among the fragments, she discovers a card containing crucial information about the individual who ordered Azure to betray the army. Finally, the officer speaks up, revealing that the only one capable of matching Ching is the White Tiger. The subordinate struggles to believe that the traitor is a White Tiger envoy. The man simply states that the true White Tiger envoy is located in the northwest. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the protagonist's team as they draw closer to a settlement belonging to the Snake tribe. Long approaches a villager's door and knocks firmly, hoping to see if anyone is home. To his surprise, a gun tumbles from the door, dislodged by the force of his knock. Suddenly, something catches Yibing's eye, and she dashes toward it. Wong, curious, asks what she spotted. "Don't touch it," she warns, pointing at a lizard on the ground. Long notices the peculiar twinkle in the creature's eyes and raises an eyebrow. Just then, Lin interrupts, picking up a fallen gun. "We should focus on the house," she says. "There might be a corpse inside." As he prepares to enter, Yibing suggests they surround the area and investigate first. The protagonist counters, saying that hesitation and theatrics only draw attention, so they decide to enter immediately. Long notices Yibing's discomfort and asks what she's concealing. Just then, an explosion erupts from the opening where the lizard had slipped through. It's clear now, someone is waiting on the other side of the wall. Long decides it's best to heed Yibing's advice and leave the house. As the mercenary makes a dash for it, he's intercepted by a subordinate of the Snake tribe leader. In a flash, Lin channels his lightning power, thrusting his hand into the wall. With a crack, the barrier shatters, unveiling a corpse shrouded in scales. Nerba approaches cautiously, scrutinizing the lifeless figure. He belongs to her tribe. For some reason, the protagonist is convinced that this man is the same lizard that slipped through the opening. The theory resonates with everyone present. Nerba accuses Bing of transforming her tribe members into lizards. Long steps in, restraining the mercenary and threatening her to reveal the truth. As Nerba bids farewell to her tribesmen, the members of the snake tribe stand visibly shaken. Bing flashes a chilling, satisfied smile. Suddenly, the corpse before them begins to swell, blisters erupting on its skin before it explodes in a gruesome display. The protagonist's team stands frozen in shock. Meanwhile, the tribe leader, furious, threatens to eliminate Bing. Long grips her tightly, preventing any chance of escape. In a moment of determination, Nerba decides to take action and charges forward with her staff raised high. The mercenary drives her knee into Long, breaking free from his grasp. In a swift motion, she reveals a hidden gun and aims it at Nerba. Simultaneously, Lin and Feng train their pistols on her, creating a tense standoff. The protagonist urges her not to act impulsively. After a moment of hesitation, she relents and tosses the gun to the ground. The hero then calls for calm, asking everyone to hold their fire and allowing Bing to speak. The mercenary reveals her true identity. She is a white tiger envoy and a double agent. The northwest border has been a battleground, plagued by ongoing conflicts between the Sandwolves, the Snake Tribe, and various other clans. Bing reflects on the harsh reality that ordinary people like her bear the brunt of this turmoil. She confesses that she once believed the fighting was behind her, until the white tiger appeared, saving her and rescuing her village from despair. From that day forward, she became his subordinate. He instructed her to blend in with the Sandwolves until Lin arrived. It soon became clear that the White Tiger was the true leader of the Sandwolves, with ambitions not only to dominate the Northwest, but also to track down the protagonist. Lin remained silent, absorbing the weight of the revelation. Bing then turned to Nerba, recounting how the Snake Tribe had burned her village and stolen everything she held dear, prompting her to fight back. Nerba acknowledges her past mistakes and expresses her regrets, but Long counters, insisting that Bing has no justification for her actions. In a fit of anger, he threatens to unleash all his ammunition on her. The protagonist interjects, urging his friend to allow the girl to speak. The mercenary steps in, pushing Long aside and reminding him to respect the cheat's wishes. In response, Bing reveals the locations of other Snake Tribe members, offering this information as a reward for Lin's willingness to listen to her story. With a sharp snap of her fingers, she unveils a chilling sight. Bodies suspended from the ceiling. The hero realizes that these unfortunate souls were victims of the very ally she had fought to protect. Feng, intrigued, asks how she manages to transform people into lizards. Bing reveals that she uses a potion bestowed upon her by the White Tiger Lord. Nerba, horrified, accuses her of cruelty, but Bing merely grins, claiming there's a thrill in watching people squirm until they metamorphose into animals. She adds that killing the clan leaders was even more exhilarating. Lin can't believe he failed to see through this woman's disguise. Even the Supreme had been deceived. He realizes she has allied herself with the traitor, but Bing screams back, insisting that it was the White Tiger who brought order to the Northwest, and no one, especially Lin, has the right to insult him. She remembers the day her village was destroyed, the pain of her wounds fresh in her mind, as she stumbled towards civilization, where the Sandwolves roamed. Just as some men attempted to harm her, the White Tiger emerged, fiercely defending her. In that moment, Bing realized how often she had felt overlooked, but on that fateful day, the White Tiger called her by name, breaking through her solitude. That's why she refuses to be seen as the villain. The leader of the snakes was the one who first destroyed her people and wiped out her entire family. Everything she has done has been to ensure that the names of those who mattered are not forgotten. In a fit of anger, Bing accuses the protagonist of failing to save them when chaos engulfed the Northwest. She shouts that he turned a blind eye to the suffering around him. Feng observes Lin's growing fury as the power of the Supreme begins to seep from his body. In a sudden eruption of rage, Lin unleashes a storm of lightning, obliterating everything in his path. The soldier, eyes fixed on the traitor, asks if he should take the shot. Bing interjects, insisting they should target her instead, for the curse of transformation is tied to the White Tiger Lord. With her location now revealed, escape is no longer an option. At that moment, a flock of manipulated birds soared overhead, sending a wave of concern through Nerba. She realized they were acting on Bing's orders, and feared that the power of her staff had been thwarted by the White Tiger. Meanwhile, Lin exuded a chilling aura as he commanded his allies to prepare for any incoming threat. The assault on the birds commenced. Long wielded his weapon with precision while Lin unleashed a torrent of crackling lightning. The number of enemies is overwhelming, and Long concludes that the only solution is to eliminate Yiving. She counters his plan, insisting it won't work, and warning that without negotiating with the White Tiger, they are doomed. Frustrated, she calls him a fool for not recognizing the trap's triggers. Exhausted, she turns to walk away, but Long fires a shot aimed at her face. In a split second, Fang redirects the bullet upward, asserting that some conflicts can be resolved through dialogue. Lin, however, is convinced that the monsters will continue to emerge as long as the magic matrix remains intact. He ascends above the clouds, where the birds soar, and unleashes his lightning power. In an instant, the monsters are obliterated, feathers cascading down like confetti. Long admires his boss's incredible talent, but Yibing interjects, insisting that this strategy won't succeed. He explains that this trap in snake territory was meticulously prepared to counter their efforts. The team fights with all their might, but Yibing reminds them that Lin still doesn't grasp the complexities of the Northwest. Distracted by her words, Fang is jolted back to reality when a soldier warned him to stay focused. In a shocking turn, a red-eyed bird suddenly swoops down and pierces Long's neck with its beak. Fang screams, fearing the worst, but the soldier swiftly grabs the bird and dispatches it, averting disaster. Suddenly, a swarm of birds descends, showering the scene in a spray of crimson. Long is struck in the back, but refuses to back down, proclaiming that even if he were reborn, he would still choose to be a Chinese soldier. With determination etched on his face, he fights on until he finally collapses. Feng rushes to assist him, but Nerva intervenes, cautioning him against sacrificing himself. Meanwhile, Lin continues to slash through the relentless flock of birds. Suddenly, a signal crackles through Lin's communication device. On the other end, a voice reports they have finally made contact. Xin and the little princess have been kidnapped. Lin's focus wavers for a moment, and the mercenary seizes the opportunity to envelop him in dark magic. With a cold satisfaction, she thinks to herself that her mission is now complete. Meanwhile, Qing delivers the grim news. Wang has been murdered, Dr. Li is gravely injured, and the lab constructed by the Supreme's wife lies in ruins. All research on meteorite iron has disappeared. In a desperate attempt to safeguard the girls, she has surrounded the city, only to discover that White Tiger's forces are lurking everywhere. Overwhelmed with guilt, Qing kneels and apologizes for her failure. But Lin, now engulfed by the black magic circle, urges her to continue protecting his family. His fury surges, shattering the black magic with an explosive force. He screams, demanding to know how the Sandwolves dared to lay a hand on his family. In an instant, a colossal lightning bolt strikes Yibing, reducing her to a mere skeleton. Nerba watches in stunned disbelief at the Supreme's overwhelming power, questioning why it hadn't been unleashed sooner. Feng, sensing the depth of his anger, realizes that the White Tiger has crossed a line that should never have been crossed. Lin comes to a stark realization. The battle in the Northwest was orchestrated by Bai Hu from the very beginning. He had been intentionally distracted, dealing with the Sandwolves, only to be lured into no man's land to decimate the Snake Tribe. This was all part of a larger scheme to create an opening for an attack on Binhai. Cradling Long's lifeless body, Lin feels the weight of guilt pressing down on him. He blames himself for inviting his friend on this ill-fated mission. With a heavy heart, he turns to Nerba, seeking permission to bury Long according to the traditions of the Snake Tribe. Feng mourns the loss of both Long and Nerba's subordinate, who fell in battle against Yibing. As the cloud of smoke clears, Lin turns to Nerba with a grave warning. The meteorite that controlled the ancient snake territory has been destroyed, allowing supernatural powers to surge back to life in no man's land. He emphasizes that the iron from the meteorite is the key to the Northwest. With determination, he declares that the White Tiger will mobilize his army and territory to claim it for himself. Though still not fully recovered, Lin vows to do whatever it takes to save Yixin and Rui. The three survivors pile into the car, and he accelerates to full speed. Nerba, feeling a sense of betrayal, questions whether the White Tiger is one of his subordinates. Lin reassures her, explaining that her influence in the Chinese army ended years ago. He recalls a time when there were 4 formidable soldiers: Zilong, Baihu, Shang, and Shanwu. They now conserved their forces in various locations, with Zilong always by his side. Initially, he thought the White Tiger remained in the west, but months ago, he discovered that the man had relocated to the northwest border. Feng confesses that he once believed the Supreme and the White Tiger would bond over their shared status as orphans. With a wry smile, he quips that perhaps the man is simply obsessed with honing his will. Nerva scowls at the joke, his resolve hardening. He vows to take down the White Tiger, regardless of his own cultivation progress. Meanwhile, Lin can't shake the feeling that the White Tiger's rebellion is somehow linked to Shen Yang. The scene shifts to a breathtaking waterfall, where Feng's words ring true. The White Tiger is deeply engrossed in cultivation, slicing through the water with effortless precision. Suddenly, a messenger arrives, breathless with urgency. He delivers the grim news. Yibing has completed her mission, but she has been murdered. He inquires whether she will be celebrated as a martyr. The White Tiger crushes the rock beneath him and coldly demands to know her identity. The trembling messenger replies that she was the girl embedded within the Sand Wolf squad. The White Tiger commands him to summon the sergeants. Meanwhile, in Northwest Civilization, Feng loads the final supplies. This time, he sets out alone, accompanied only by the leader of the Snake Tribe. He asks Nerva if she is certain about not joining him in Meteorite space. The girl hesitates, still mourning her fallen subordinate. The scene shifts to Binhai City, where the protagonist realizes he has no choice but to return and save his family. He learns from his subordinate that Azure has set an ambush in the parking lot. Xing feigned falling into the trap, hoping to capture the mastermind behind the betrayal. In the midst of chaos, the little princess harnessed her electromagnetic force to steer Azure away, successfully diverting the White Tiger's attention. However, the rebels loyal to the White Tiger quickly closed in, surrounding everyone. Rui attempted to unleash her powers once more, but the rebels countered by using meteorites to absorb energy, capturing them in the process. In the fray, Dr. Li sustained injuries while bravely defending them. Overwhelmed with guilt, Sheng knelt before the group, pleading for punishment. Lin insists that she bears no responsibility, claiming this was the White Tiger's meticulously crafted scheme. He presses her for information about his wife and daughter, but she shakes her head, indicating she has no knowledge of their whereabouts. With urgency, Lin commands her to locate them by the end of the day. He expresses his concern that the White Tiger in the northwest and Shenyang in the capital might soon ally. Qing interjects, sharing her findings. So far, there has been no evidence of communication between Baihu and Shenyang. Suddenly, a deafening roar cuts through their conversation. Ching turns to see a pack of wolves advancing, wild and poised to attack. The protagonist remains still, but the girl stands ready to defend him. This sparks an idea in Lin's mind. Rather than facing two threats at once, he decides to scatter his forces and harness Shenyang's power to contain the White Tiger. Without hesitation, the protagonist urges Qing to pursue his wife and daughter. In an instant, the girl vanishes into thin air. Determined, the protagonist declares that he will put an end to the wild dogs. The scene shifts to the royal palace, where Shen Yan learns that Lin has returned to Binhai City. The Dragon Lord ponders what the Supreme might be plotting. The servant reveals that Baihu seized the opportunity of the Supreme's expedition to the northwest to quell the rebellion, capturing both his wife and daughter in the process. He speculates that Lin has returned to rescue them. Shen Yan chuckles, questioning how Baihu could possibly capture someone from Qing. However, his amusement quickly fades as he realizes that Baihu's actions might be a strategic move to take control of the city of Binhai. The servant delivers shocking news that causes Shenyang to drop his glass of wine. His spy has revealed that the Black Armor army is completely under the control of the White Tiger. In a sudden outburst, the Dragon Lord demands to know if the subordinate is aware of Baihu's intentions. The servant responds that the purpose behind the kidnapping of Lin's wife and daughter remains a mystery, but it appears that Baihu has taken the girls to a specific location. Shenyang senses that soon, no one will be able to halt these men, particularly the White Tiger who has seized control of the protagonist squad. It appears that even the Supreme is no longer taken seriously. A servant mentions that Lin now only has Qing by his side. Shenyang contemplates whether it's possible to defeat them with just a wave of his hand. Meanwhile, outside the palace, the hero stands resolutely at the entrance, blocking any passage. The guards sense a dark energy enveloping the air, and it dawns on them who he truly is. Unaware of their realization, Lin strides confidently into the castle. Shen Yan, having anticipated this moment, grants him entry into the room. The protagonist settles into a chair with ease, as the Dragon Lord remarks on how long it has been since they last met face to face. Lin addresses Shen Yan as the young emperor, suggesting that he might already be aware of the reason for his visit today. He speaks plainly, stating that he has come to request his troops, assuring him it won't be for nothing. The protagonist responds that once the soldiers assist in rescuing his family, he will focus on pacifying the Northwest and stabilizing the situation in the Imperial Kingdom. Shen Yan inquires if the Supreme is in a hurry. Lin replies that the forces in various districts are prepared to act and may not be able to wait much longer. This situation could spell disaster for Shen Yan, as his position hangs in the balance. The Dragon Lord recognizes that even without a wife or daughter, the protagonist remains a formidable force. Wasting no time, he agrees to lend his troops, but emphasizes that the front line will be bolstered by his electromagnetic force. Lin nods, grasping the implication. Shen Yan is alluding to the ultimate sacrifice. He decides to reveal the truth about the electromagnetic force when the moment is right. Taking the royal family badge, he hands it to the protagonist. Lin bids farewell and departs from the palace, heading towards Shen Yan. After all, no matter how powerful someone may be, worries can turn even the strongest into a puppet. On ordinary days, the Supreme will be unable to assist Shen Yan. Never ask for help from your enemy. Moments later, the hero acquires a car and receives the news he's been waiting for. His wife and daughter have been found. They're in a green space designated for studying exotic matter. King informs him that he has already assessed the situation and noted that the security around the building appears lax, suggesting it could be a trap set by Baihu. Lin, undeterred, responds confidently, "This little trick won't hold me back." He entrusts her with the task of organizing the soldiers and directing them to the lab. The scene shifts to Rui, suspended in an analysis tube. Baihu is taken aback to discover that her electromagnetic force remains dormant. He speculates that this is due to Rui's youth, believing her electromagnetic energy has yet to fully develop. Just then, Baihu learns that the protagonist has returned to Binhai City and is making their way toward him. The man is taken aback by the swift return of the Supreme and quickly reaches out to his ally. On the other end of the line, the White Tiger demands the transfer of Lin as a hostage. Baihu inquires if the trap is set, to which the servant confirms it is ready. Just then, a noise from above catches their attention. They both look up, puzzled by the commotion. Suddenly, one of the servants, his head engulfed in desperate smoke, warns the Lord that the building has been surrounded by the envoys of the Dragon Lord. They detonated the entrance and are preparing to launch their assault. Baihu remains confident, believing he holds the upper hand with the Supreme's wife and daughter in his grasp. Meanwhile, outside, the Dragon Lord's soldiers strike with precision. They report that the enemies in Area A have been eliminated, and now they just need to breach the gate. In mere seconds, they succeed in doing just that. Beyond this wall lies the battlefield. The hero steps forward, unleashing a barrage of energy rays at enemies who were once his comrades. He engages in hand-to-hand combat, confronting them with a fierce accusation. They have betrayed their brothers and their homeland, yet they still dare to raise their swords against their former leader. One soldier, subdued by the hero, retorts that he is merely following orders. The Supreme's heart stops at the revelation. He turns away, then asks the soldier if he still intends to fight him. The soldier, however, warns that Shin and the little princess are in the lab across the way. The Shenyan soldiers suspect it might be a trap, but the protagonist dismisses it as just another cheap trick. With determination, he places his hand on the scanner, and the door slides open, granting him access. The Lin soldiers remain on high alert, their senses heightened in the thick fog that envelops the room. Suddenly, the door slams shut behind them, echoing ominously. A shadowy figure emerges from the darkness, drawing the protagonist's gaze. His heart races as he spots his wife and daughter, unconscious and ensnared within a menacing machine. Baihu spreads his arms wide, a grin on his face, as he declares his delight at the Supreme's appearance. Meanwhile, the protagonist cries out, desperately trying to rouse his family from their slumber. Fury surges within him, and he unleashes a bolt of lightning at Baihu, but the man effortlessly sidesteps the attack, taunting him about the Supreme's weakness. Undeterred, Lin continues his assault, determined to fight back. Just then, a portal materializes beside him, crackling with energy. Baihu admits he never anticipated the Supreme would harness electromagnetic force, even with the meteorite suppression weighing down on him. Perhaps it's because he is the key. The protagonist scoffs at the absurdity of his words, but a sudden realization dawns. Baihu has acquired the meteorite. The enemy chuckles darkly, proclaiming that it's not just iron that will bend to his will. Soon, the entire world will belong to the White Tiger Lord. In that instant, he reaches into his suit pocket and tosses something onto the ground. A thick purple cloud of smoke erupts, shrouding the room and obscuring the protagonist's vision. Panic sets in as he recognizes the toxic mist and urgently commands his soldiers to cover their noses. Disappointment washes over him at Baihu's betrayal. They had once shared a bond as close as master and servant, but that connection now feels like a distant memory. He successfully reunites with his family. Later that day, his wife and daughter are rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, Dr. Li has made a full recovery and is there to care for Jin and Rui, allowing the protagonist to breathe a sigh of relief as they will soon awaken. Just then, Jin arrives with urgent news for the Supreme Leader. She warns that while the Black Armor army is now under complete control, Baihu has managed to escape. Lin inquires about the origin of the meteorite. The servant explains that it was brought in from the territory of snakes and that the insulated laboratory has been researching methods to control electromagnetic forces. Suddenly, the protagonist slams his fist against the wall, leaving a crumpled dent in its surface. In that moment, he comes to a startling realization. Bai Hu is merely a puppet of the White Tiger. For Lin, it becomes evident that the White Tiger's ambitions are expanding. He even had the audacity to drag Shin and Rui into this chaos. Bai Hu may hold the reins of the Black Armor Army's military power for now, but that grip won't last forever. As the conversation unfolds, they strategize on how to track down the elusive White Tiger. Suddenly, the protagonist's wife stirs awake, startling him. Jin rushes to embrace her, relief flooding his voice as he exclaims that he is finally back. Lin embraces her tightly, apologizing for the delay. They share a heartfelt conversation, and she notices that her body feels unchanged, a reassuring sign that the protagonist is unharmed. Just then, their daughter enters the room, and both parents beam with joy at the sight of her. Jin feels a wave of relief wash over her, while the Supreme turns to his wife, expressing how much he has missed her. He openly expresses his concern for his family's safety, explaining that this is why he must leave. Gently stroking her hand, he promises that once he eliminates Shen Yan and Bai Hu, they will be able to live happily together forever. His wife wishes him good luck, assuring him that she believes in him. As an aircraft descends onto the hospital roof to pick up Lin, Rui stands proudly, knowing his goal is clear. Rate the iron meteorite and bring peace to China, Xin commands. She turns to Lin, asking if Xin and the princess have been safely transported to the secure location. Lin nods, reassuring her that they are safe. He adds that Rui's electromagnetic force has drawn countless enemies, so she must remain behind to protect his family. With a determined look, he tells her that once everything is resolved, she should meet him in the northwest. The scene shifts to the northwest, where members of the Sandwolf squad revel in their recent capture of a striking woman. Nerba finds herself encircled by these unscrupulous men. Before she can react, a bullet strikes her shoulder and she collapses, unconscious. The mercenaries deliberate on their next move. One of them, clutching Nerba's staff, proposes tying her up and bringing her to their leader. As they ready themselves to depart, a sword plummets from the sky, shattering their car into pieces. They look up, searching for the source, but find only emptiness. In an instant, a figure clad in reinforced armor emerges, retrieving the sword with an air of authority. The mercenaries, taken aback, open fire, but the hooded warrior swings the blade with such ferocity that flames erupt around him, illuminating the scene with a fierce glow. In an instant, several mercenaries fall, while others scramble to hide behind rocks, only to be hunted down mercilessly. The armored man observes a few soldiers making a desperate escape with the remaining vehicle but decides against pursuing them. Instead, he seizes one of the mercenaries who dared to stay behind, gripping him tightly as he demands answers about the fate of the Snake Tribe's territory. Trembling with fear, the man reveals, "The White Tiger destroyed it and stole our supplies." The armored warrior advances, demanding to know why they captured Nerba. The mercenary stammers, narrowly avoiding the blade, and hastily explains that they had no real plan. They simply stumbled upon her and left her staff behind. Taking a deep, furious breath, the warrior turns and walks away. Meanwhile, at China's central training base, Qin leads his companion inside, emphasizing that this is the safest place in the entire country, where the Supreme trained his elite troops. Xin inquires if this was ordered by Lin. The subordinate confirms, reassuring her that there's no need for concern, as they are in safe hands with Xiao Yang, Lin's former right-hand man and an expert in electromagnetic force. Relieved, Qin expresses her trust in him, but wishes she could do more for her husband. Just then, the subordinate recalls something and asks if she remembers the necklace her father gave to Rui. She replies that she never managed to decipher the relic. Qin suggests asking Xiao Yang, believing he might understand its secrets. She agrees, calling it a brilliant idea. The scene shifts to the following day in the Snake Tribe's territory. An armored man is busy cooking lunch, boiling a snake in a pot. Nearby, voices echo through the air. The protagonist strolls alongside a local villager, who shares a troubling update. The old man reveals that he hasn't seen his friend since the Supreme left the Northwest, and the Sandwolf squad has been eerily silent since then. He continues, recounting a peculiar sight from the previous day. A tall, muscular man with a fierce gaze descended from the sky, took up residence in the square, and simply slept there with a massive sword by his side. With a nod, the villager gestures to the man, drawing the protagonist's attention. Lin approaches Xuan Wu, a hint of nostalgia in his voice as he remarks on how long it's been since they last met. Xuan Wu removes his helmet, revealing a serious expression. "I severed ties with Bai Hu long ago," he explains. "Recently, that traitorous leader incited the Black Armor Army to rebel against me, and now they're hunting me down." He pauses, his gaze intense. "Ever since I heard of your awakening, I've been searching for you." The protagonist inquires about Suzaku, but a heavy silence hangs in the air. The villager offers a glass of water before asking why Master Xuanwu wields the staff of the Snake Tribe leader. The armored warrior explains that he recovered it upon his arrival, discovering soldiers trying to capture Nirba. Lin cautions his friend, emphasizing that Nirba, the staff, and the meteorite are all intricately linked. The White Tiger likely requires all three to further his plan. Xuanwu concurs, noting that crossing the meteorite without Nirba is nearly impossible. The scene shifts to the Sand Wolf territory, where Nirba dangles helplessly from a trap, yet he remains resolute, refusing to back down. Suddenly, Xuanwu receives the command and descends from the sky, crashing dramatically among the mercenaries. The landing sends men sprawling, setting off their trap. Bombs rain down on Xuanwu as Lin shouts for his partner to retreat. A shadowy figure emerges atop the Sand Wolf castle, mocking the protagonist. "Did you really think you could just waltz in here?" He taunts, gesturing to the side where hostages, once saved by the protagonist, now find themselves in peril once more. The retired soldier fires at one of the attackers, issuing a stern warning to the Supreme not to come any closer. But Lin, fueled by anger, disregards the caution. In response, the old soldier conjures a swirling mist of sand, obscuring their movements. The protagonist quickly grasps their strategy. They're using the sandstorm to mask the effects of the power outage. He shouts to his partner that he will take care of the situation while they focus on rescuing the hostages. Xuanwu tightens his grip on his sword and charges ahead. Bombs rain down from the castle, but he leaps through the flames with unwavering determination. The castle's forces press harder, the ground shaking beneath his feet. The protagonist calls out to his friend, urging him not to push himself too far. With fierce resolve, Xuanwu stabilizes the stone platform holding the hostages, buying precious time for Lin to mount a daring rescue. The plan unfolds successfully, but the old soldier has one last trick up his sleeve. Without warning, the ground beneath the Supreme gives way. The true trap reveals itself, an underground crusher. As the old soldier makes his escape in an airship, Lin finds himself engulfed by the shifting sands. Struggling against the pull, he feels himself being dragged down until something in the sky catches his attention. Enormous birds swoop down, their powerful wings lifting him from the jaws of the crusher. They are under the control of Nirba,